This session is interactive, which means we have lots of things for you to smell and taste. Just so you know, we're going to cut the session into 3 parts. The first part is a consumer test. So we're going to have you taste 3 samples of grass-fed milk, 3 samples of grass-fed beef, and give us your opinion, how much you like it or not. And I'll go through those instructions in a minute. Then the middle part of the session is going to be sensory training, where I'm going to use food products, not milk and beef, but food products to teach you how to be a professional taster and teach you what we're looking for when we evaluate food and beverages, how the tongue works, how the nose works. And then at the end, we're going to go back and taste more grass-fed milk and more grass-fed beef. But this time, rather than telling me how much you like it or not, we're going to talk about what it smells like, what it tastes like in objective terms as trained people. And I'll share with you some of the research we have going on in both areas, grass-fed milk and grass-fed beef. Now, because we have a large group of people, because this is interactive, I'm going to need a little bit of help from you. So when we taste the milk, and milk is the first thing we're going to taste, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you to get up and to walk over to the table where that gentleman is with the microphone, grab a panel sheet, so grab a piece of paper in the end, and then grab one of each of the cups that has a dot on it. So you'll notice there's a red dot, a yellow dot, and a green dot. Just grab the sheet, grab your 3 samples, and go back to the table and sit down. And when everyone's back, we'll get started with the first consumer test. Sound good? All right, so if you want to get up and go ahead and grab those samples while we're waiting, that would save us a little bit of time, I think. So go ahead up to the table. And by the way, just to save a little time while you're in line getting your samples, I'll just introduce myself very quickly. My name is Roy Desrochers. I work with UVM Extension, University of Vermont Extension, with Heather Darby. I know a lot of Heather in the Northwest Crops and Soils program. Although I am an odd duck in that group at UVM, I'm an odd duck in this room for a couple of reasons. One is I'm a city boy, not a farmer, with a funny accent because I grew up outside of Boston. So although I know most of you are farmers or people that support the farming industry, I've been a professional taster for a little over 40 years, but most of my activity has been with big food and beverage companies. So I helped to develop Dunkin' Donuts coffee and Tropicana orange juice and Jack Daniel's whiskey and a whole bunch of global leading products. About 8 years ago, I hooked up with Heather and we started doing work with grass-fed milk to try to figure out the other end of what we call the value chain. What happens at the farm that affects the final product? And so I'll tell stories during this session that relate to some of that global experience that we're trying to use, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, to understand issues that affect grass-fed products like milk and beef. I'm a chemist by training, but I'll try not to talk too much chemistry through this. I'll try to keep things pretty straightforward and simple with the sensory stuff. I tell people all the time that sensory is not rocket science. It doesn't take a PhD genius to learn sensory, but it does take practice. The best tasters in the world, and I train tasters, for example, all the breweries in the world, all the big food companies, the best tasters in the world are the ones that taste most often. They have the most practice. It's like playing a musical instrument. Anybody can sit at a piano and hit those keys. But if you want to reach that ultimate level, if you want to make it sound really good, it takes practice. And that's what sensory does. Okay? Couple more minutes. Now, when we get to the grass-fed beef, we're going to use a little different approach, and I'll describe it when we get there. It's going to be family style. We're going to put a little bowl of 3 samples of cooked grass-fed beef, and I'm going to have you put a little bit on your own plate and do the taste test. And then for the sensory training, when you're finished with the grass-fed beef, we're going to put a whole tray full of products in the middle of your table, and I'm going to ask you to resist, because you're going to see candy on there. You're going to see really cool, yummy stuff. Everything has a purpose in the training. So I would ask you not to just grab stuff from the tray and start eating it. All of it is going to help me teach you what we think about in objectively measuring aroma and flavor. Okay, so it looks like most people are wrapping up getting their first sample. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run what's called a hedonic test, or an overall liking test. Now, in order to do this test, everybody needs to understand the happy face scale on your answer sheet. So all of you should have picked up an answer sheet. It should say sample number 1, number 2, number 3. And next to each sample should be a series of happy faces. As silly as this look, it's the most powerful way to do consumer testing for overall liking in the world. And the reason for that is you can overcome language barriers, and there's no confusion around the scale, because this scale is not a linear scale. Okay? You'll notice the middle face has a flat mouth. So the middle face is neutral. If you taste one of these milks and you say, I don't like it, but I don't not like it, I'm neutral about it, you would put a big X across that middle face. I'm neutral. As you go to the right, you see a little smile, a bigger smile. Eventually, you see a smile with the hair up, and imagine the hands. This is the greatest thing I've ever had in my life. We call that degrees of liking. So the more that you like the milk, the bigger the smile. The only rule is you can only put one X. You can't X more than one face. Now, let's say you taste it and you don't like the milk. There's a difference between saying, I don't like it, or saying, I hate that. That's the worst thing I've ever had. So the left side of the scale are what we call degrees of not liking. The further you get away from the middle, the more you don't like that sample. But we've made it easy for you, because all you have to do is look at the mouth again. A little frown, I don't really like it. A bigger frown, wow, that's bad. Really big frown, ooh, that really sucks. That's terrible. Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to say that. And then you see the first one? Those are teardrops. That means this is so bad, it makes me want to cry. It's the worst. I will never taste this again, Roy. Don't ever give this to me again. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to taste the 3 samples. Now, the color code on the right, the red sample is going to be the first one you're going to do. That's sample number 1. Yellow cup is sample number 2. Green cup is sample number 3. Just as importantly as telling us whether you like the sample or not is that line underneath. We want you to write down in your words why you liked it or why you didn't like it. And can you try to avoid saying things like, I didn't like this because it tastes bad. What was bad about it? Or this was yummy. This is so good. Oh, why was it yummy? What did you like about it? Everybody get it? Okay, so if you could do me a favor, spend a couple minutes, taste the 3 samples, put a cross on one of those faces, write some words down, and when we're finished, we'll go on to the beef consumer test.
There's a question. Wow.
Sure.
Is there any technique to tasting?
That's a great question, because we have whole classes on standardizing how we're doing it. In this case, we want you to taste it as you normally would as a consumer, because we want your opinion. But great question. Now, on our panel, where we're using the human instrument, we go to great lengths to make sure everyone's looking at the same sample, it's representative, and everyone is tasting the same way. So what would be an example like that? I was talking with someone at breakfast about work I did in Colombia with the Federation de Café. When we're cupping black coffee, we slurp as professionals. Everybody has to slurp. So one person can't sip and one slurp, because when you slurp, you aspirate the coffee and it increases flavor. So in order for us to function as an instrument, an objective instrument, we have to standardize what everyone's doing. I helped to develop Wrigley's gum early in my career, and we had to run a metronome, which put out a beat so that all the panelists chewed at exactly the same rate in order for us to measure consistently flavor release from the gum. When we developed most of the health and beauty aids you use, lotions and things, we put a template on someone's arm that has a cutout circle so everyone has the same surface area. Use 2 fingers, we train them, put the lotion on there, and rub at a certain rate, certain number of times for a certain number of minutes, and then we teach them to take what are called bunny sniffs. So it's a great question, because the sensory that I do is not consumer. It's not what you're doing right now. We're not giving an opinion. I'm trying to use my tongue and my nose, which I'm going to teach you in a bit, to make highly objective, sensitive measurements on what things smell and what things taste like and what things feel like. Great question. Another question? I love questions.
I feel like a pop star. Are we comparing the 3 samples?
You're not comparing the 3 samples. Great question. I want you to think about it as 3 independent samples. So start with the first one, taste it. Do I like it or not? Cross off a face and write down a reason why. Go to the second one. Taste it. Do I like it or not? Cross off one face. Why? And then do the third. I am not asking you to rate them. I'm not asking you to say, okay, of the 3 samples, which do you like the most? Understand, I'll be able to tell because I'll be able to see the faces that you cross off. So if you liked one more than another and you follow the directions, you should have checked off a face that has a bigger smile. You're happier. You liked it more. And if you didn't like it, then I should be able to tell because you would have crossed off one of those frowns. The teardrops are funny. I'll tell you a quick story while you finish this before we get onto the beef. The company I used to work for called Arthur D. Little, we developed food rations for the military, for the joint forces. And so we had to do consumer testing with special forces, people like Marines and airborne. And I remember going to Camp Lejeune within the Marine Special Forces, they call them PSYOP. And they looked at this, and one of the war warriors, they call them, or soldiers, I would say, looked at us, we can't do this test. Marines don't cry. That's what he said to me. So then another guy jumped in. They were all looked like they were 13. They're probably 20 years old. The other guy looks in and said, no, just pretend those are blood tears. And all the Marines were like, that's cool. All right, we can do it. Blood tears. That's what we're going to do. We just use it to get the point across that it's degrees of liking and degrees of not liking. Is everybody finished with the milk? Or pretty close? So can we start, while you're finishing, can we weigh out the beef? And now what we're going to do is the helpers are going to scoop out 3 samples of hamburger labeled 1, 2, and 3. On your table, you have another answer sheet. This one should say grass-fed beef. And it's going to be the same process. You're going to look to the bowls they bring out. There'll be a little plastic serving spoon in there. You should have little plastic spoons already on the table. It's okay to use the same spoon for you to taste each sample. Just don't stick the small spoon in the serving bowl. We'll give you a separate spoon in the serving bowl. But then also what you have are plates on there, okay? And on your plate, if you look up on the screen, should have the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So when they bring the bowls of hamburger onto the table, I'm going to ask you to pass around each bowl, take about a spoonful, maybe half a spoonful, you don't need much, and put it in front of the number on your plate that says number 1, 2, or 3. And then after you have all 3 samples, we'll get started with the grass-fed beef part. Does everybody understand? So just, if you be patient for a second, they're going to start putting those out.
Are we bringing it to the?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can start.
We will come to you with this portion.
Nobody needs to get up so you can finish your milk. We're going to collect these sheets, but I'm curious from the group. Did you see differences between those 3 samples? You did see differences between all 3 samples. I'll let you know at the end what the samples were. I don't want to give you too much information yet because we're going to retaste these after I train you. But I will tell you that all 3 of those milks are grass-fed milk. I'll tell you that, and I'll show you a little bit of results, but we're really not talking results today. We're talking what's going on and educating you about sensory. But we just finished a 4-year USDA-funded study on grass-fed milk. And across the country, when we went to the market, we saw differences based on geographic location, even within a brand. So if you think of a brand like Maple Hill or Organic Valley, we saw differences across the country with the same product, 100% grass-fed milk. And we saw seasonal differences, which probably doesn't surprise most of the farmers. And I'll add this because we know from working with people around the world, what level of difference is meaningful. And I want to be crystal clear when I say that. As scientists, we always look for statistical significance, right? The problem is we're really good at what we do, so we can find really small differences that doesn't really mean a whole lot to the average person. So we have to interpret the results a little differently when we think about food products. And we have to identify what is the meaningful difference. How much difference does there need to be before someone doesn't drink as much or doesn't buy as much or doesn't eat as much in the case of the grass-fed beef? And I will tell you, in that last study we just finished up, the differences we found were meaningful, meaning that the average consumer drinking those grass-fed milks not only saw a difference, but it drove emotion. It drove some of them to buy more, some to buy less. It drove some of them to drink more, some to drink less. Okay. All right, let's see. All the same. So once the bowls start arriving, if you could pass the bowls around, there should be a clear spoon in each bowl. Pass the bowls around amongst yourself. And
Roy? Excuse me, we might have picked by mistake 2 serving cups up. So could you check on your table for the number 2 labeled ones and see if there is a double stack with an empty one underneath? Because we're missing.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, there's.
Okay, what?
My favorite expression, you just can't get good help these days, right? I can't really say that because my wife.
Missing sample number 2.
Oh, the tables. Okay, if you already have your samples, if you could pass them around, take a scoop, put it on your plate. And so you should end up with 3 little piles of cooked hamburger. The wonderful people here have done a great job cooking these up and setting everything up for us. And the only thing I'm going to tell you going into this test is that all 3 samples are grass-fed beef, all 3 samples. So once you have your samples, you pass them around, you've got your plate set up, go ahead and use the beef sheet to taste each sample. Decide for yourself, do I like it? Do I not like it? How much do I like it? How much do I not like it? Cross off one face again. And really important for us, write down some words. Now,
Does everybody have 1, 2, and 3? Nobody needs any. Great. Thanks to you.
Okay. And just so you know, we're going to use that same system of passing out the samples at the end of this session. So at the end of the session, I'm going to ask you to get up and get milk. They're going to bring out some more milk, and we're going to do the hamburger again. But if you could go ahead and do the hedonic test, the consumer test on the hamburger now, and please take a few minutes to write down some good words. Why did you like it? Why did you not like it? We're going to collect these sheets, and this data is actually going to be used toward the 2 projects that we're working on, just so you know. So group like this is a great opportunity for us to get some really good data. Understanding that we did not segment you. I love the discussion earlier up here, and I'm going to refer back to that a few times because they hit on so many great points. But one of those points is what I would call consumer segmentation. And I think it was Mark talking about people, educated people versus people that might not have the same level of education or socioeconomic. This group represents not a typical cross-section because we have a lot of farmers in the room. So we have to take that into account when we look at this overall liking data. And it's funny because when I first joined UVM 4 years ago, prior to that, I was running a sensory center at Tufts University right down here in Medford, Mass. When I first started, I ran a grass-fed milk taste test with some farmers, and they absolutely loved it. And I said, why did you love it? I can't tell the rest of the story. I'm going to have to wait because I don't want to give you any answers that on your sheet right now. I'll come back to this. But it was funny that we predicted, based on what we call flavor leadership criteria that I'm going to show you, if we went to a bigger population that was a better cross-section of average consumers, especially the main group of people that are drinking milk, that the results would actually be reversed. And we ran a taste test at one of our organic dairy conferences, and sure enough, the model predicted perfectly which one of the samples, based on the sensory characteristics, would be more liked and more consumed by the average consumer. So some of you aren't average consumers. Some of you really do identify with the flavor of the products at your farm or your local farm. I love it. I have to keep an eye on the time because I tend to tell too many stories. But I'm more than happy to answer questions in the group. Someone asked a question during the last discussion, and I found it a really interesting question. Someone asked about pricing of beef. And I thought that the speakers gave a great answer to the value of beef and the pricing of beef. But there are other dimensions to that question that you have to consider when you get out to the food industry, whether it's a restaurant or food service. And that's everything else that goes into the pricing. Because certainly the atmosphere, the tone of the restaurant or the food service environment, all of those things have to fit together. The price fits with the presentation, with the atmosphere, with everything. And so it really is a complex question. Now, if the question were a little different, how do we get the most margin, the most price for our product? Then that's a different answer. That's taking into account consumption habits and what I'm going to call the flavor leadership criteria. And it's a really interesting discussion. And one of the many hats I wear is I teach courses at culinary schools like Johnson & Wales down here in Rhode Island, where we work with the faculty, the chefs, to bring together the science of tasting with the culinary experience. because the science of tasting is a little different. For example, I'm going to teach you that we don't do flavor by eye. When we get into the training in a few minutes, I'm going to teach you, don't let what you affect what your result is. Base your results on what you taste and what you smell. But in the culinary environment, that whole presentation, the whole promise that's given with what it looks like is extremely important. And so we have to factor that in. Okay. Did we put the crackers out yet? Oh, it's on the trays. No, that's fine. A couple of things, just so you know, when we get to the next section, we do want you to have a chance to rinse your palate between samples. Okay. We didn't ask you to do that here, and we typically don't do it when we do hedonic test. When we get to that point, if you don't have a water bottle, there's water up on the back table. You can get yourself a glass of water. We also will be putting on the table unsalted top crackers. And I'm going to go into why those in particular are important, more important with grass-fed products than perhaps some other products, to help us cleanse the palate before we go to another sample. How's everybody doing? Everybody almost done? Couple minutes? I'll give you another minute. And then when we're done, Elaine, can you guys collect all the sheets? Because they don't need to hold on to those. So just collect them all and just put them in a folder for me. As you finish, they're going to come around. If you could just give them your answer sheets, you don't need to hold on to those. We're going to give you other sheets to use at the end of the session once we train you a bit in how to do this. You don't need to put your name. I know it says name at the top. If you want to put your name, that's fine. If you want to put a first name, if you want to put a nickname, if you want to make something up, you could be in a write-in ballot or something. What we need is your data. If we were running a formal hedonic test, we would have pre-screened you, number one. So we would know a lot more about you. We'd know about your education. We'd know about your socioeconomic status. We probably would have asked you questions about your normal eating and drinking habits, so we know what bucket you fall into, because there is segmentation in the market, right? Not everybody's equal. And usually there's a big segment of people that have a lot in common with what they like and don't. And then there are little flavor segments. Sensory strategy for food companies is a big deal. You got companies like Gallo Wine in California. They have a strategy that says, we want a bottle of our wine on every table. They have to understand every segment of the market, what they're looking for. Then you have other companies that say, we don't want that many SKUs. We just wanted the biggest piece of the pie. We want to know what the biggest segment is to deliver to that. And that's going to come into this discussion a bit. And again, I forget if it was Mark or who it was in the room earlier was talking a bit about grass-fed beef and there being a certain person that might like grass-fed beef. And maybe it's not everybody that likes grass-fed beef, but maybe it's whether it's education level or cultural or whatever it is. And that's part of flavor segmentation. Flavor segmentation is a huge thing that we need to understand in order to be successful in the market. The other thing we would have done, if we were running a more formal taste test, we would have given you a sensory test when you came in the room. So we would have given you a bottle to smell and something to taste to make sure you can smell and taste. Here's why. Now more than ever, we're having problems with things like COVID. We've got people that were asymptomatic who have either totally lost their sense of smell and taste, or the one that's harder to determine is it's been compromised. And I can tell you it's real because I train tasters around the world, and I'm being asked this last year and a half since everything opened up and I can travel again to retest the people that I trained to see if they have a compromised sense of smell and taste. And the number right now is around 10% people didn't realize it. They had COVID and their sense of smell and taste is compromised to some level. Not 100%, but some level. So one of the things we want to do before we collect data is make sure you can still smell and taste. Because otherwise, we're going to have variation in the data we're going to have to deal with, and it has nothing to do with how much you liked or didn't like the sample. It's your physiology, right? All of our senses are governed by our nervous system. Viruses attack our nervous system. We do a lot of research with cancer patients, with chemotherapy and radiation, same thing. Chemo, radiation attacks the nervous system. It affects one of the trigeminal nerves that goes to your nose, and you get a compromised sense of smell. If you know anyone who unfortunately is going through chemo, very often they'll say things. Yep.
Is everybody done with the beef because tasting? Because I think we're going to clear all of that off the tables and we're going to go around with trays, or you can put it in the trash here. And then we're going to go to the next stage and bring new stuff to your tables. You don't have to come up for this next part.
Okay, perfect. And I'll move on while they're cleaning up. I'll move on with some of the discussion before we get to the taste training. I mentioned that most of my career has been on the global level. Most of my career has been in the middle and the right side of this slide. It's been with manufacturing companies and it's been with consumers, understanding consumers. This is the value chain for grass-fed products for all food and beverages. And the first step is critical. It's where all the raw ingredients come from. It's at the farm level. And so we need to do more research at the farm level to connect the dots to what happens that affects that end product. And so the projects I'm going to show you later, we're beginning to do that. We're beginning to connect the dots between what the cows are eating, how they're exercising, what's the sanitizer we're using, what are we cleaning holding tanks with, and how does that affect the quality of the milk and what affects the quality of the beef. Now, in the process of researching this, it is less useful at this point for us to have anyone say, I like that or not. What we're looking for from this point forward is to remove that aspect and have you be an instrument, a human instrument to describe what you taste and what you smell. Now, quality matters. There may be questions, usually not from a group like this, but typically we get questions, what about marketing? Isn't it true that people put more money into marketing, they'll get more sales? It really isn't true. It does help. More marketing helps to create more first-time buyers. But in order to have sustained success in the market, which all of you want, ultimately you want your products to grow in the market and stay that way, not just be a fad. You don't want a 3-month grass-fed fad. Everybody tries it. Oh yeah, it was a great idea, but it doesn't deliver to the promise that they think, and then it goes away after a while. Quality really matters. In this slide here is actually beer. And this is what we call a flavor map developed by trained tasters. So this is not consumer data. It's not someone saying I like it or not. This is actually what the beer tastes like as measured by trained tasters. And I will tell you, the bottom dimension is how clean the beer is. Does it have any off taste? Does it have an aftertaste? Is there too much mouthfeel? These are very objective measurements. The y-axis is how complex the beer is. So very light flavored beers would be on the bottom, regular beers in the middle, premium, high intensity, complex beers at the top, like craft brews and microbrews. You notice each dot on that graph is a brand of beer in the United States. Similar color dots are similar brands of beer by the same brewer. And I'll tell you that the 4 dots that are yellow all belong to Anheuser-Busch. Now, this is the mainstream. This isn't microbrew or craft brew. They belong to Anheuser-Busch. And we can easily predict this with MAP that they will be the market leading products. And they are. They still have about 50% of the market. What's interesting here is the green dots. The green dots are 4 different brands of beer by one brewer. And they think they have 4 different beers that consumers can drink and enjoy. But if you look at the flavor results, that's not a big enough difference for them to notice and have meaning. Consumers view those 4 brands exactly the same. And they're not the #1 brewer in the US. Now, the other thing I want to mention about this slide is something we're doing with the grass-fed products, because we also know that there's a certain amount of variation that consumers will accept and still like the product as much. We call it the circle of acceptability. For example, another great comment, and I think it was Mark that made it, he said, look, we don't need to make the grass-fed beef taste good one time. We have to do it consistently, summer to winter to whatever. It's absolutely true. You can't win in the market if you make a statement like, yeah, but it's local and it's fresh, so there's more variation. I worked for a company in Germany that is a global supplier of honey. And they had that philosophy. He said, no, when we sell it, it always tastes different. We tell the people we source the honey from Africa and Asia and different places. And so they know that it's supposed to taste different, and they were failing in the market. Consumers don't buy that message. Consumers like things, they want it to be consistent. That's what they want. And so what we need to understand when we research grass-fed products is how much variation is acceptable. So the big mission is, what does it taste like? What are we delivering? But then we also need to answer, okay, but what are our parameters? How much can we get away from summer to winter? or from one part of the country to another based on other factors. When you want to be successful in the food industry, and you as farmers and people that support farmers are part of that industry, we need to deliver to four things to have what we call sustained success. So one of those things is marketing. You do have to market, and we call it delivering a promise to people so that they want to buy the product. More importantly, for sustained success are the two on the sides. One is delivering what they want. If they expect a certain flavor in that grass-fed milk, give it to them. Don't get close, give it to them. And then the second one is do it the same way all the time, because consistency matters. Now, the one that's really important to you and to all of us is the bottom one. We have to achieve all that, but still make sure that the product is priced so people can easily buy it and use enough of it to make it a healthy industry, but also for them to really realize the nutritional benefit. People don't get nutrition if they don't eat enough of it. They need to have a certain amount to get the nutritional benefit. It's not good enough to say that's a healthy cup of tea, but we also have to be careful with that statement, because if it is a healthy cup of tea, but you have to drink 3,000 cups a day to get the benefit, that's a little bit of a disconnect. So we have to pay attention to all this. And what we do as human instruments is develop information to be successful in all four of these areas. So we develop messaging that goes, sensory messaging that goes into the marketing. We help farmers, processors figure out how do we produce what it needs to taste like, and how do we do that consistently? And then we work with all the stakeholders in the value chain and figuring out, okay, how can we do that and make it cost effective? The best non-alcoholic beer I ever had, I kid you not, was a Michelob in St. Louis that we used reverse osmosis, dialysis to remove the alcohol. It tasted like a real beer, but had no alcohol. The problem is it would have cost $60 a six-pack. Nobody's buying. They'd rather go flash it off and have it not taste quite great and spend $10 a six-pack than pay 60. So it was cost prohibitive. So the sensory instrument, the sensory tool, can help understand that. It's one of the things we're doing on our projects. How can we help farmers? How can we help processors adjust things to get the right flavor, but at the same time, making sure we're watching costs, making sure we're trying to reduce costs, making sure we're making it practical and that the margins are big enough that everybody's happy. Consumers, like what you just did, are really good at telling us what they like and don't like. They stink at telling us why. In fact, a lot of times they tell us something and we think we know what they mean, but we don't. I did work in South Africa with a wine company called KWV. We did a global wine test and people said, I don't like this white wine because it's not buttery enough. I need more butter. A winemaker that hears butter, they think diacetyl. It's a compound that forms in fermentation. They can easily adjust fermentation and made the most buttery tasting white wine you could ever have, and it failed miserably because consumers didn't mean butter. What they meant was buttery, creamy balance of flavor. I don't want things sticking out. I don't want it to be harsh. And so then KWV went and took that approach, developed a brand called Cathedral Cellars, and it's one of the #1 imported wines in Japan, Germany, and I think the UK. But for us, and I think, again, the two very knowledgeable, very good speakers before me talked about this a little bit. People eat and drink what they like. That's what they do. And we have to accept that. We can't force things on people, at least not easily. And in my world of sensory, we talk about the 3 C's, and this will be the last of the education, and we'll get tasting again. You can go ahead. Oh, you already put the other trays on? You can put the other trays on. So they're going to put some trays on the table, but don't eat any or drink anything yet, because we're going to use these in a minute. The 3 C's of success, okay? The first C is consumption. That's what all of you are striving for. You're striving to produce a product that either the end form or is an ingredient in something that want to eat often and a lot of. That's consumption. That's where you get high market share. The second C is compliance, and this is where some of you get faked out. Because compliance means there's another reason than what it tastes like and smells like for somebody to be eating it, okay? Now, where it works is in the pharmaceutical business. A doctor prescribes a medicine, and we have to make it taste good enough that you'll actually comply and take your medicine, but we don't have to make it taste great. We just need to get compliance. We need to say, look, we're going to make that children's cough syrup take good enough that your child's actually going to drink it so they get better. Some people make the mistake of, yeah, but if we can give them a value proposition, maybe they will comply to the proposition. And the most commonly misused one that fails is nutritional value. And I could talk more with you where you say, this may not taste as good as what you normally eat, but it's more nutritious for you. And what happens 99% of the time is in focus group settings, people say, oh, I'm going to eat that one. I'm going to eat that one. And then when they go to the store, they buy the one they like the best. It's very difficult to push these other reasons so with grass-fed beef, if we say, look, and I agree with you guys, by the way, that it is a cultural issue. We need to change the way people think about these things. But in today's environment, to go out and say, look, you should be having more grass-fed products because they're better for you. They'll say, hey, great idea. And there's a certain segment, a small segment that will actually do it. There are some people that will do it. But the majority of the people, the big segment, they're going to behave the way they always have behaved. They're going to go for what they like, what it tastes like, what's available that they like. And so compliance is a tough one. Complaint is the one we all want to avoid. So we don't want anything in there that someone will dislike so much, they're not going to eat or drink it again. So that's the game we play with grass-fed products, is understanding what is the quality, what are we delivering, what do we need to deliver to grow the markets, okay, and not get stuck in those smaller segments. There are some criteria I'm going to teach you called the flavor leadership criteria. These are criteria that hold true for every food and beverage in the world. If the product meets these 5 criteria, it has a chance of being a market-leading product or has a chance of sustained sales. So the first one is, when I take some grass-fed milk or I take some grass-fed beef and I eat it, I should immediately get what I expect it to taste like. There shouldn't be a flavor delay. I shouldn't get rancid fat, or I shouldn't get something else. I should immediately get what I expect. And if I do, okay, I'm one up on my flavor leadership criteria. Amplitude or balance and fullness of flavor, we're not going to get a chance to spend a lot of time today doing that because it's so complicated. We run whole courses. I just ran one for Heineken and Zoeterwoude in the Netherlands. Whole courses on balance and fullness, whole week-long courses just on this subject. But it's critical because when we start talking, and I hear some of you in the room will say things like, grass-fed beef has a certain depth of flavor that the other beef doesn't have. Depth of flavor is your way of talking about fullness of flavor. It's the complexity of the beef. And so this becomes an extremely important measurement for us to eventually make. Even the case in milk, okay? Mouthfeel has to have a compatible feel. This is a tricky one. You have to understand what's compatible. So if you're eating spicy mustard, it's okay to have some sting. You expect it. If you're eating a piece of grass-fed beef, if you're getting sting and irritation, that's not a good thing because people don't associate that with the product, okay? If you're eating a piece of bread, you don't expect mouth coating and greasy and oily, but if you're eating ground beef, that's part of the profile, so that's okay. So compatible mouthfeel is an important one for us to understand. Off notes is easy. Everybody understands there shouldn't be flavor in there that isn't intended. So we shouldn't be picking up Barney taste if it's not supposed to be there. We shouldn't be picking up this thing we call sweet urine. It's the flavor of what, if you ever pick up a baby that has a wet diaper and you smell that sweet urine smell, that's a note that we get in grass-fed milk from time to time. Some people also describe it as like cereal milk. Like you put cereal in a bowl, get rid of the cereal, and you get that milky, sweet smell. It's a very similar note. We may see it in the samples today. I'm not sure yet. And the last one, and this is one that people argue with, and maybe some of our experts would argue with as well. Market-leading products have short aftertaste. So to take a philosophy and say, I produce this product, but I want the flavor to last. I want people to sit there and enjoy it for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. There are small segments that like that. But the bigger segments for all food products are, it delivers what I want, gives me everything I need, the complexity, the balance, but it disappears quick enough that now I can enjoy another bite or take another drink. It is, in fact, the secret to Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola gives you lots of stuff. It comes early. It's balanced. It's complex. Within 30 seconds, most everything is gone and you're ready to drink some more. Okay. So we need to understand these things. I'm going to teach you some of this during the session.
Wait a minute. Is that why we're so fat too?
That is a loaded question. And I thought the subject earlier touched on a bunch of the really important issues. I love the discussion around thinking about what we eat and really thinking about what we eat, and that really in this country, people don't give a lot of thought about what they eat. And I agree with that, that it's really, we live in the US, it's eat a lot, eat cheap, eat convenient. Those are the things that we're raised on. That's what the parents are. It's like, hey, if it's just as easy for me to buy you a Happy Meal for lunch and you'll actually eat it, parents' big challenge is getting their kids to eat, and it's cheap and it's convenient, I'm just going to buy you a Happy Meal. So it's cultural, it's the products. There's a lot of work to be done there. So when you talk about sensory testing, there's 4 buckets of sensory testing. You just did the first one. We call it affective testing or hedonic testing. This is when you go out and you get people's opinion. Which one do you like better? The Pepsi challenge. How much do you like this? How much not? It's great information, powerful information for us because people do know what they like and don't, and they're very consistent at making these measurements. So these are important tests for us. All of the projects we have going on, we do hedonic testing because those numbers we're going to correlate against other stuff to figure out why. Because that's the part that consumers have a hard time. They have a hard time using terms and telling us, what was it? Why did you like that one versus that? Why did you like this one more? And so we have to have ways of translating and understanding what it is they like and don't like. Now, the second group of testing is the oldest sensory testing really in the world, other than consumer. We've been doing consumer. I think even Adam and Eve probably did a consumer test before they ate the apple. I don't know, but that's the oldest one. The second oldest is different testing. My cows are eating this. All of a sudden, now they're eating something different. Is it going to make a difference? We can set up a difference test. We can take milk, set up 3 milks. One is what we usually get. The other 2 are the different one. Can people tell the difference? It's really a horrible type of test. You don't want to do these tests because anything can affect the right answer. Temperature. If one of the samples is slightly warmer than the other, they'll get the right odd one out. Color. So really, that's not a good one. The next one, we have some people in the room are expert tasters. So wine tasters, meat graders, cheese graders. These are shrimp, seafood government tasters, coffee cuppers, brewmasters, people that are experts that know a lot about their product. The problem with, and they're very valuable. The problem with experts is 2 things. One is they have a selective language. Usually they come up with their own terms. They have their own language. And it's hard to talk as an industry. If I had a group of brewmasters, and I've had meetings at the World Brewing Congress where I do it, I'll have brewmasters in a room and I'll give them the same sample and they're all describing it using different terms that they've developed in their organizations. They're talking about the same flavor, but there's no consistency. There's no standardization of terms. It's one of our challenges with grass-fed beef, and I'm going to talk about it at the end. We're trying to develop common terminology so we can have a better discussion, that we can talk about the benefits and the complexity and the depth of these grass-fed products. And that leaves the 4th one and the most powerful type of testing that I'm going to teach you. It's called descriptive sensory analysis. And unlike the first one, I don't want to hear your opinion. No offense. So if someone says, Roy, I love this sample, I'm going to say, that doesn't matter to me. Now I want you to be an instrument. I simply want you to tell me, what do you taste and how much in objective terms? This is the bulk of objective sensory trained tasters that happens in the world for quality assurance, for research and development, new product development, and unfortunately for problem solving. We try to figure something's not right, we got to figure it out. And so that's what I'm going to teach you right now. We're going to go through some of the basics of doing objective descriptive sensory analysis. Now, first of all, when I talk about sensory analysis, I'm talking about using people as instruments. Okay. This is one of our maps, by the way, of grass-fed milk across the country. And you can see this one here, I think, is a regional one. So you see the East, the Midwest, and the West. So the East was New England, New York. The West was primarily California, a little bit up in Washington. The Midwest was around the Ohio area. And you can see the bottom of the graph, the flavor of that milk is primarily in the East. And as you go to the top, the flavor changes in the Midwest and then out in the West. This was from the first 4-year study we did. We have lots of these maps, and we have a pretty good definition of the variation in grass-fed milk flavor across the country. We have a pretty good sense of that. We also have linked it to some things at the farm. For example, one of the results of that first study was MUN, M-U-N, correlates. There's a wheelhouse where that MUN value has to be, or where the cow health has to be to produce the highest quality milk. So now we can look at the factors that go into the cow's health to adjust that. Now, farmers have known that for years. The cows have to be healthy to have good tasting milk. But now we can connect the dots and figure out, what does that mean? What's affecting their health? What's affecting the quality of that milk? And that's one of the things we're going to do in this next 4-year study that we're going to be starting up that I'll talk about. Okay, there are 3 components to flavor. Basic taste, aromatics, and mouthfeels. Okay. What are basic taste? You have two instruments that we're going to use for this session. By the way, I have a question. It's going to sound like an easy question, but I'm not so sure. How many senses do you have? Anybody know? The average person out there is going to say we have 5 senses, right? Because that's what you're taught in school. Sight, smell, taste, sound, and feel. The reality is you have 9 senses, and it's not ESP. That's not one of your senses. Okay. You've got those 5 senses, and they're all tied to your nervous system. The 6th sense is actually a sense of hot and cold. You can tell the difference between something that's hot and something that's cold until it gets really hot or really cold, and then you can't tell the difference anymore. If you ever touched liquid nitrogen, it would feel like it was burning you, and that's super cold. Because the 7th sense kicks in, the sense of pain. That's your 7th sense. The 8th sense is your sense of equilibrium. We can walk upright because of our inner ear and its connection to the brain. And then the 9th sense is actually 2 things. The 9th sense is you have the ability to sense movement. So you can sense if you're moving, and you can also sense if something's moving around you. So for the sensory work that I'm going to be talking about, we're really focused on sense of smell, sense of taste, and the sense of pain, because we do care about mouthfeels, especially things like tongue sting and tongue burn, these trigeminal effects that happen in the mouth. For this session, we're not going to focus on anymore. We're not going to do flavor by eye. We're not going to focus on sound. When we were working and helping to develop Doritos, sound is important. When you bite into a chip, it has to make a certain sound. We're not going to worry about that today. Okay, we're going to focus on the tongue, the nose, and the sense of pain. The first one is the tongue. The tongue is the first instrument we have to do descriptive sensory. On your tongue, you have taste buds, a picture of a taste bud. And what most people don't realize is you have 5 types of taste buds on your tongue. Each taste bud is only sensitive to a certain type of chemistry. Okay? And I'm going to explain this tongue in a minute because some people who know sensory are going to get upset when they see that tongue. I'm going to explain in a minute. But so, for example, you have taste buds on your tongue that are sensitive to sugars and carbohydrates. We call them your sweet taste buds. You have different taste buds that are sensitive to salts. We call those your salty taste buds. You have different taste buds that are sensitive to acids, things like acetic acid, vinegar, lactic acid, and milk. We call those sour taste buds. And you have a different set of taste buds that are sensitive to bitter compounds like caffeine or quinine or alpha acids. And then, of course, there's the 5th taste bud that we're not going to study today, although it is important with grass-fed beef. It's called umami. These are taste buds that are sensitive to a class of chemistry called glutamates, things like MSG. But we want to look out for your safety. Everything we're giving you is safe to smell and taste. If you have allergies, I'm going to ask you to refrain. We'll tell you what you're tasting so you can make a choice. But MSG is a weird compound because the average person has some level of reaction. Most of the time, they don't even know it. And then some people have more severe ones. So because of that, we don't like to use MSG in these training sessions, but we're going to focus on the other 4. And you have these taste buds all across your tongue. Okay. What this graph is saying, oh, I didn't even put it up yet. What the heck? It's not showing my graph. Oh, it is. You can't see it. What that's saying is, even though you have sweet taste buds all across your tongue, the way that your tongue is wired to your brain, we tend to perceive sweet more on the tip of your tongue than anywhere else in the what we call the dose response range, the normal range. We tend to perceive sour more on the sides, even though we have sour taste buds all across the tongue. We tend to perceive bitter way up the back. Okay. So I want to experiment with this. We're going to start with sweet. So on your table, you have a sleeve of plastic cups. So you should open up that sleeve of little 1-ounce cups. Everybody take 5 or 6 of those cups. Take a little stack. And then on the tray in the middle, there is a water bottle with the letters SW. That's going to be our sweet standard. So once you have some empty cups, go ahead and grab that bottle that says sweet, SW. It's just table sugar and water. So as long as you don't mind having a little bit of sugar, it's pretty safe. It was bought at the store. Pass the bottle around and everybody pour yourself a half a cup or a cup, depends how much you like sweet solutions. Okay. And then once you have your solution, I want you to dip your tongue in it and see if you got anything. Good. Just put the tip of your tongue in there. You get something when you put the tip of your tongue in? You should pick up a little bit of sweet. It's funny. This is why kids and a lot of adults, they like to lick sweet things. They like to lick ice cream cones and candies because you're maximizing that sensation. Now, I'll tell you a couple things about sweet. First of all, we are all genetically wired to like sweet. Everybody, when they're born, babies, like sweet. They want to eat sweet. They want to swallow it. Okay. And even though we've talked about obesity and some of the negative things, the fact of the matter is most of those carbohydrates and sugars in the world are not bad for you. They're not poisonous. They won't kill you. In fact, early man, that's nutritious. That's getting nutrition. You need sugar. You need carbohydrates. And so it's Mother Nature's way of saying, look, I'm going to lick this, taste sweet. I'm genetically wired to like it. Sweet, we get sweet in grass-fed milk, but most of the sweet we get in grass-fed milk is going to be in the nose, not on the tongue. And we get very little sweet in grass-fed beef, but we'll get to that when we get back to tasting the milk and the beef. Everybody finished with the sweet? All right, then we're going to move on to the second cup. So there should be a bottle on the table that has SO. Now, SO is going to be sour. We use food-grade citric acid to make it up. So imagine, what are the sour candies? Sour Patch Kid candies, or any of these candies that have the white powder on the outside, that's citric acid. It's very safe. But go ahead and pour yourself a little bit of the SO. And I want you to think about this. When you taste the sour, think about what's happening on the sides of your tongue. See if you're detecting it on the sides of your tongue. Okay. So now those are different taste buds. The first solution, your sweet taste buds, were the detector. This is different. Now we're reacting to citric acid. That's a different taste bud. That's a sour taste bud. You should be sensing it along the sides of your tongue. And not only that, but you should get a couple of mouthfeels. When you drink that sour, you should salivate and you should pucker, right? We're going to get to mouthfeels in a little bit. Those two mouthfeels are actually really important. Salivation is part of the digestion process. It's also part of the cleansing process in your mouth. If you go in a restaurant, and I'm sure many of you have, go in a nice restaurant and between courses, they'll give you lemon sorbet or they'll give you limoncello. Usually they'll give you something that's sour because the sour kicks in the salivation. You salivate and the salivation cleanses your tongue and gets it ready for the next course in the meal. Sour is an interesting one because we, forever as humans, are born really not liking things that are sour, right? It's another genetic thing. And yet, we have environmentally, culturally introduced sour at earlier ages. So now kids that are 2 and 3 years old love those Sour Patch Kid candies. And you get them to bite into a lemon. In the old days, you would do it to be funny and see them make a face. Now they love it. They bite into that. We've actually changed because we're educating them to like it. You're all born not liking pain. Everybody's born not liking pain, but you can teach yourself to love pain. People do it. People around the world teach themselves to love hot peppers, and they can't get them hot enough. They'll sit there sweating and having a hard time breathing, but have convinced themselves they love that pain. But we are born not liking pain. We're born not liking sour, but that's gotten a younger age. Sour is going to become a real important one with both grass-fed milk and grass-fed beef, because sour on the tongue is something that varies in those two products. Okay, the third one is going to be table salt. So if you have high blood pressure or any aversion to salt, don't drink the SA. So if you look on the tray, there's a bottle that says SA. So you can go ahead and pass that around. Now, salt taste buds are funny because in the diagram earlier, if you saw salt was in the middle, we kind of taste salt all over the tongue. It's not as geographic in our perception as the other ones. So when you taste this, and you should get salt, hopefully everyone is tasting a little bit of salt, it should be all over your tongue. Now, salt really is a miracle spice because when we add salt to things, and I know Megan keeps telling me I have to talk to Mark and others about making sure we put salt on steak and do certain things. Salt does more than just add salty flavor. Salt potentiates flavor, so it makes it seem stronger. But more importantly, salt creates harmony of flavor. We call it balance. You put salt on foods, it brings things together, makes it difficult to pick out what's in there. And when we run training programs, one of our demonstrations, we'll go buy a whole bunch of products that have salt and the same product without the salt and look at the differences. And there are numerous differences. It's not just that this one doesn't taste salt and this does. The whole product tastes different. It's less intense. It's more disjointed, or it's more harmony. Salt is a miracle spice. The key for this training is that those are all different taste buds. The sweet are one type of taste bud, sour is different, salt is different. And now we get to the fourth cup, which is bitter. And I will warn you, bitter is, we're using caffeine. So if you don't want to drink caffeine, you have an aversion to caffeine, don't drink the bitter cup. It's not a ton. It's about equivalent to a medium to strong cup of coffee. But I want you to taste that bitter and notice what happens in the back of your mouth. So pass around the bottle that says BI, take a taste, and you're going to look for bitter taste way in the back of your mouth. I'll give people a minute. Now, bitter is a tricky one. Bitter is a tricky one because most of the bitter compounds in the world, things like caffeine, things like alpha acids and hops, things like quinine, these compounds don't want to go into water. They're not soluble in water. In order for your taste buds to work, whatever you're tasting has to dissolve in your saliva first. And then your saliva carries it into your taste bud. So when you have a product that has sweet, sour, or salty, those compounds dissolve very fast in your saliva. Normally, you taste those right away. They're early in the flavor. Bitter is not like that. Bitter normally comes later in the flavor. And it's a solubility issue because that caffeine has to dissolve in your saliva first. It also causes an effect where it seems like it's building. You take a sip of that solution and it's bitter and you're like, maybe I notice it, maybe I don't. But as you sit there for 10, 15 seconds, it gets a little stronger, it gets a little stronger. And maybe a minute later, it's even stronger. And you're like, wow, what's going on? What's happening is the caffeine is slowly dissolving in your saliva, which then is going in your taste buds. And so your perception is going up over time. Now, it causes a big problem for us. Not so much in grass-fed milk. Grass-fed beef, we run into some bitterness. But let's say you were beer tasters and we were tasting IPAs, which have higher levels of bitter. Once the bitter chemistry is in your saliva, it doesn't want to come out. So when you drink water, if you say, oh, consumer would say, I have a yucky taste in my mouth, I want to get rid of it, and they go to drink some water, it's not going to help. Because now that the bitter compound is in your saliva, it doesn't want to go into that water you're drinking with. And so the only way to get rid of that bitter taste is to physically remove the saliva in your mouth. That's why professional tasters will use things like these non-salted crackers. Because if you eat a little bit of cracker and the cracker absorbs your saliva that has the bitter chemistry in it, you either swallow that cracker or spit it out, your mouth will produce new saliva that doesn't have the bitter chemistry in it. There's only one secondary thing you have to do, though, is you then have to drink some water to get rid of the flavor of the cracker, because the cracker is going to have some flavor. So if you have bitterness in your mouth and you're having a hard time getting rid of it, eat a little bit of cracker or some white bread, something to absorb your saliva, spit it out or swallow, and then drink some water. Okay? Now, we're not going to talk about umami. Now, the other thing about bitter that I'll mention, like sour, we are all born not liking bitter. In fact, so much so that bitterness, your bitter taste buds, are linked to your brain, connected to your gag reflex. Your natural reaction when you taste things that are really bitter is to spit it out, to not swallow it. I'll just point out most of the things that are really poisonous for you in the world are very bitter. But like pain, you can teach yourself to enjoy bitter. Lots of people drinking coffee today that's bitter, or tea. Sure.
What about astringent?
Astringent is different for us than wine tasters, okay? Astringent for us specifically means puckering of the mouth. Astringent in the wine industry connects mouthfeel and basic taste, so it's something a little different. For our purposes, astringent is a mouthfeel, and it's the puckering that you get from things that are sour. I will tell you that there's another type of effect. You can't tell the difference as a taster. You still pucker, but it's not because of sour, it's because of metallic compounds. We call it metallic astringent. So certain metallic compounds will make your mouth do the same thing. You'll pucker, you'll salivate. There's a chemical compound. If anybody wants to know reference things, I'll tell you, but ferrous fumarate is a classic compound to use that doesn't taste sour, but it's going to make you pucker when you taste that solution. Okay. So now for the news flash. For people that don't know this, some of you know this, some don't. Those 5 things that I just talked about, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, are the only things that you taste in your mouth. Okay? And they're the only things you taste in your mouth because that's the only detectors you have. You have sweet taste buds, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. You don't have a detector in your mouth to taste milk, to taste beef, to taste vanilla, to taste chocolate. You can't. You don't have an inch in your mouth to pick up anything except sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. And I'm going to prove this to you. There's a lifesaver on the tray, a little white piece of candy. If everybody could take that lifesaver, open it up, but don't eat it yet. Take the piece of candy off the tray. It's just a lifesaver. Don't smell it. Just open it up and get ready. Okay?
The Tic Tacs or the,
Not the
so
Tic
we're
Tacs.
missing the lifesavers.
The round candy. The Tic Tacs are for something in a few minutes. So you're going to take a piece of that round candy, and as much as it looks a little silly, I want you to hold your nose nice and tight. Don't let your nose go. Okay? Hold your nose nice and tight. And while you're holding your nose, lick that piece of candy. And while you're holding your nose, tell me what you taste. You shouldn't taste much. Maybe a little bit of sweet, maybe a little sour, maybe a little bitter. Yeah, you could taste those things because those are on your tongue. Take a couple more big tastes, right? Lick that really good. Let your nose go. I love it. I call it the fireworks part of the show because half the people always go, wow, that's pretty cool. So what just happened when you did that? Here's what happened. We have a second instrument we use for sensory. It's called the olfactory bulb of the nose. And there's two ways that the sample gets to your nose. One is breathing through your nose. But the second way is flavor chemistry that is in your mouth that has to go up the back passage, the retronasal passage, to be detected in the same place, in the olfactory bulb. So what happened here is I had you hold your nose. When you hold your nose, the air from your mouth cannot go up into your nose because it's blocked. You're licking that piece of candy. What's the flavor, by the way? It is minty, but we're professionals. We need to be more specific. Is it spearmint, peppermint, or wintergreen? Here's the way to tell the difference. Peppermint always has a lot of cooling because it has menthol. You shouldn't be getting a lot of cooling with this. Spearmint is the rarest of the three, and it's a green, minty, leafy. Wintergreen is medicinal, like Pepto-Bismol tasting. This one is wintergreen. And you know, it's funny because when you travel around the world, like Mark says, he's been to Europe, we're one of the few countries in the world that uses wintergreen in food products. When I do training in Europe and Asia, South America, I give them this candy and they spit it out. They think I'm trying to kill them. Because wintergreen is only used for like sports rubs, Tiger Balm. And yet we have a beverage in the US that's wintergreen flavor that people love. Any guesses? Root beer. Somebody just said it. Think of root beer as you're tasting this piece of candy. Most of the store brand root beers don't use root beer flavor. They use a compound called methyl salicylate, which is artificial wintergreen. So next time you drink root beer from a store, think wintergreen and you're going to be surprised. So anyways, we hold our nose. We've got that wintergreen chemistry in your mouth, but you don't taste wintergreen because you have no detectors other than your taste buds, and they only pick up sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. As soon as we let our nose go, that flavor rushes up to our nose, and that now can detect everything except the basic taste. And we say, wow, I taste wintergreen. Okay? This works for everything. For the rest of your life, I promise you, if you hold your nose, you will only taste sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. You won't taste anything else. So if we're tasting grass-fed beef or grass-fed milk, and we want to focus, how sweet is this really, how sour, but the milk flavor or the beef flavor is getting in the way, hold your nose. We hold our nose, we're going to blank out on everything else. And let me prove it to you because there's a bag of gumdrops for everybody on that tray. Grab that bag of gumdrops, okay? And I want you to pick out the purple one. Some of them are light purple, some are dark purple. It's the same flavor. Now, if I give you a purple gumdrop, what do you think it's going to taste like? Great. I want you to hold your nose. Don't let your nose go. I want you to take a bite of that purple gumdrop, chew it up really good. Now, while you're holding your nose, what do you taste? Sweet. Doesn't have much flavor, right? Chew it up really good. We're going to get it in your saliva. That helps with basic taste. It also helps liberate these volatile compounds. Now let your nose go. What happened? Now you taste something else, right? You're actually smelling something else because that flavor chemistry is in your mouth the whole time. You just can't taste it in your mouth. What did you taste now? What color licorice? Black licorice, black jelly beans. This is anise, brown spice. I always get disappointed because I do a lot of work in the food industry and the alcohol industry. And every time I do these candies, everybody always says black licorice, black jelly beans. Nobody says Zambuca, or ouzo or any of those wonderful. We care more about candy than booze, and it's disappointing because it's a great industry, especially with grass-fed beef. All right, let's try another one. How about we're going to try the orange one is tricky. Oh, and by the way, I asked you what that was going to taste like, and you said grape, and it tastes like anise, which is black. We don't do flavor by eye. As human instruments, as trained panelists. So try the orange one now. It's not going to taste like orange. Okay? Let's go ahead and hold your nose, then let it go. This is a tough one. It's tough for, oh, you guys are good. I heard it yelled out here. We'll see if anybody else gets it. It's tough for two reasons. One is it's lower intensity than the other one. So that makes it a little bit difficult. It's also just a tough aromatic because not many people really recognize this. The answer is clove. Clove. Right? Like you're baking a ham, you put the clove on there. In the beer industry, Hefeweizens in Germany have a lot of this clove note. It's 4VG or eugenol. It's going to work every single time. Let's try one more color and then we can move on. Which color you want to do? You want to do red next? Green? Red? We'll do them both. Let's do red next. We'll save green till last because as a consumer, green is my favorite. So we'll save that till last. Oh yeah, I should be taking pictures from up here, huh? What you think of the red one? Cinnamon. As professional tasters, we have to even go further than that because that's not like fresh ground cinnamon. That's like artificial cinnamon, like they use in candy, like dentine gum or those big fireball hard things that are basically like a choking hazard. I'm an old guy. My parents tried to kill us so much when we were little because when we were little, they'd give you those jawbreakers. They call them, they're huge, and say, go ride your bike. They're the #1 choking hazard in the world, and they go ride your bike. It's terrible. But I bet you half of you that are parents have been mean to your kids because here's what parents do. Their children get sick and doctor prescribes some medicine. So they go to the pharmacy, they get the medicine and the child takes a taste. I don't want to eat it. It tastes yucky. And the parents will say, hold your nose. What you do when you tell a child to do that is they hold their nose, think about what we just learned. They blank out on everything except sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. And they're reacting to the bitterness of the drug, and they can't taste the bubble gum, the fruit flavor, whatever the pharmacist put in to make it better. It actually makes it 100 times worse if you tell them to hold their nose. You're just being a mean parent. You just let them just take it like the pharmacist says, and it's fine. All right, now let's do the green one then. Now, hopefully, I haven't asked this question, but I'm going to assume that nobody is an alien in here or anything, and it's not working. Hopefully, when you hold your nose, you're not tasting it. And as soon as you let your nose go, you taste it. And as I said, experiment tonight at dinner, experiment. It doesn't matter. Cup of coffee, whatever you cook for dinner, no matter what you're eating, if you hold your nose, you won't taste anything except sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, which is that savoriness. What about this one? What is green? It is spearmint. This is the other mint. It doesn't have cooling. We didn't give you the peppermint was the white one. And I'll be honest with you, these are a store brand and the peppermint tastes horrible. And I love to cause some pain and suffering in tasting so people earn their way through the session, but that was too much. I just said, I'm not going to do it. Peppermint, because peppermint, you instantly, most people go like this, like most breath fresheners and things have menthol. And if it has menthol in it, it's peppermint. This green one doesn't give you a lot of cooling. Now, sometimes they make double mints. So they'll put spearmint in and a little bit of peppermint just to give you a little bit of that cooling. And it can get a little bit more complex. Okay, so in my world, what I'm trying to teach you, when I say basic taste, so when we get to tasting the products again, and I say, okay, what basic taste are you picking up? I'm specifically asking about the tongue. Are you picking up sweet, sour, salty, bitter, or umami? If I ask you, what aromatics are you picking up? That's the word we use to describe what we detect with the nose. Aromatics are going to be cooked beef, cheesy, buttery, barny, like animal, sweaty, vomit-like. All of these words that are not sweet, sour, salty. Oh, that's not the worst one. We taste a lot worse. Sweet, you know what I mean? Baby diapers. These are all things that we smell in our nose. Now, there is a third category. And the third category is what we call mouthfeels. Now, I want to be careful here because people often confuse mouthfeel with texture, okay? And it's really simple to think about what the difference is. Mouthfeel is describing how your mouth feels. And just so you know, the definition of the mouth for our purpose starts at the lips, the gums, the teeth, the tongue, the inside of your mouth, the roof of your mouth, and into your throat. So whenever we have a mouthfeel, it could be something burning your lips. It could be a tooth that you're getting from phosphoric acid and Coca-Cola. It could be a thick yeasty feel in the back of your throat, or it could be something on your tongue or anything in between. Okay, so when I say mouth or mouthfeel, you're describing what's going on in your mouth. Things like, my mouth is dry, my tongue's stinging. I chewed up that peanut butter and now I feel like I got little pieces stuck in my teeth. That's called tooth packing. It's a mouthfeel. A texture is when you describe the product. I drank that and it was thick. You're describing the product. I bit into that Dorito and it was crunchy. You're describing the product. Anytime we, as professional sensory people, describe the product, it's a texture and it goes somewhere other than the flavor profile. There's a thing called a texture profile. Okay. Now there's a lot of gray area stuff. Okay. So years ago, we worked on laxatives. Don't laugh. We did have to work on laxatives and swallow it. And it was not a fun project. But we worked on Metamucil and Citrusol were the two big products back then. And if we were tasting a sample and we wanted to say, oh, tastes like there's little pieces in it, that would be a texture and we would put that one place. But if we drank that Metamucil or that Citrusol and said, oh, I feel like I got little pieces stuck in my teeth, now it's a mouthfeel because now we're describing what happens in our teeth. The same thing happens with peanut butter. We'll have crunchy peanut butter. If we're saying that peanut butter tastes like it has little pieces, crunchy things in there, that's a texture. We're describing the peanut butter. But if we're tasting that peanut butter and we say, hey, I feel like I have little pieces of peanut in my mouth, now it's a mouthfeel. We call it particulate mouthfeel. Okay. Mouthfeels are pretty important, more important in the grass-fed beef products than the grass-fed milk. In the grass-fed beef products, we have things like mouth coating, oily mouth coating, greasy mouth coating, tongue sting. We have a lot of texture notes with grass-fed beef because there's chewiness and hardness and dryness of the meat, different than dryness of the mouth. So I want to practice with this just a little bit. You notice there's a bottle of cranberry juice. If you want to take one of your little cups, pass around that bottle of cranberry juice and take a little taste. Okay, now go ahead and taste it. Now, when you tasted it, let's not lose an opportunity to practice what we learned so far. What basic taste do you get when you taste that cranberry juice? You get some sweet. Now, we're not going to talk about intensity today, but we also have to measure how much. So if I asked you a simple question, is the sweet level in that cranberry juice slight, moderate, or strong? What would you say to me? Yeah, it's moderate. It's in the middle. Slight would be, I get it, but it's low. Moderates, I get it, but it's not strong and it's not slight. And strong would be, wow, I get a lot of sweet. So food products, moderate, which is what this is. This is the same sweet level as Coca-Cola, believe it or not. You're having a hard time picking up that level of sweet because there's another basic taste that's there as well. You should be getting sour, and sour at a moderate level. Now, it's not strong sour would be vinegar, lemon juice. This is not that sour, but it's quite obvious. It's not slight. It's not low. Strong sweet would be like strawberry preserves or grape jelly. This isn't as sweet as that, so it's something in the middle of the scale. Okay, what aromatics do you get in that cranberry juice? You should taste cranberries. Right? Maybe not fresh cranberries. Maybe it's a little cooked cranberry, little ripe cranberry. Maybe you don't recognize it as cranberry. You say it's red fruit esters. But there's a fruity note. There's a cranberry note. You're getting that in the nose. And then what mouthfeels are you getting? Astringent. You should pucker, right? It's sour. Salivation. You should salivate. And the third one that we use this as a reference standard for is dry mouthfeel. You take a sip of this and your whole mouth should get dry. Okay, it's one of our reference standards. We like to use food reference standards to train the panel. This is a good reference standard for astringent, salivating, and dry mouthfeel. Okay, now what I want you to do is there's a bottle of unsweetened tea, pass that around and pour it, and we'll do the same thing. And by the way, I want to congratulate you because you just produced your first descriptive sensory result. We didn't say whether you liked it or not. We didn't say if it was good cranberry juice or not. We just described what it tastes like, what it smelled like, and to some degree, how much. You would think so, but we can have both. It's different chemistry causing the two different mouthfeels. In fact, we have this phrase we use with most beverages called astringent and dry, that you get that puckering and you get dry together. And with astringency usually comes some salivation. They're not competing. You can have them both. Now, are there products that are stringent or has salivating and they're not dry? Yes. Are there products that are dry that you don't have astringency and salivating? Yes. But you can also have them together. So go ahead and taste that tea. Let's talk about basic taste. What basic taste do you pick up in the tea? It does have some bitter, but slight, moderate, or strong. Yeah, it's less bitter than the cranberry juice was sour. So we're at the slight end of the scale. And that bitterness, by the way, you have to wait for. It's up the back. It's not the first thing you get. What do you get for aromatics? Tea, right? Now, tea itself is somewhat complex. By the way, and I do have time because the next samples won't come out at 4. I love the discussion about metabolites and plants and affecting final flavor. When I was at Tufts, one of the biggest projects we finished up for China, for the country of China, was looking at tea, okay? And China has a problem. China has a problem where in the dry months, the tea grows a certain way that it gives it high quality flavor. So if you buy tea in China during the dry part of the year, the tea has a lot of what's called gan. It's a very sweet kind of honey taste in the back of your mouth. But as soon as the monsoons come in and the wet season starts, the flavor quality goes down, okay? And so we were asked to study this because they have an issue that the good tasting tea tastes good, but the antioxidants and the nutritional chemistry from the tea plants is lower than in the rainy season. In the rainy season, the tea is actually more nutritious, more healthy, but doesn't taste as good. And it all relates to how the water stresses the plants and the chemistry that's reacting to the water that stresses the plants. So everything links back to the plants, and it's absolutely spot on. And so we have to figure out from a sensory standpoint, how can we grow good tasting wet tea so we get the benefit of both? Because in our world, we want it to taste good enough that people will drink it and get the nutritional value. If you're in the business of selling tea, it's about money because the price drops to less than half. In fact, the Chinese economy crashes to some degree every half a year that they have monsoons because the economy is heavily dependent on tea. So anyways, when you taste this tea, what mouthfeel are you getting? What I want you to look for, and even go back and taste, is dry, but a specific kind of dry. This is dry on your tongue. And some people describe it as, it makes my tongue feel like sandpaper. It gives me rough tongue. It's a specific kind of dry that we call tannin mouthfeel. We find it a lot in products like wine, comes from the skins. There are natural tannins everywhere. In beer, a lot of times we used to find it because they use natural tannin to filter beer. Now they don't. And it was a problem because now we lost that tannin. A little bit of tannin mouthfeel actually compels people to want to drink more. It's a compatible mouthfeel with things like beer and tea and wine. You get above a certain intensity and it now becomes prohibitive. People don't want to drink as much. Okay. Okay. Now we have another concept. So we talked about basic taste on the tongue, aromatics in the nose, mouthfeels. Now I want everyone to grab a Tic Tac. So if you could pass around the Tic Tacs, don't put the Tic Tac in your mouth yet. I know what we'll do is after we do the next 2 slides, we'll take like a 10-minute break because I think we've gone a long time and then we'll finish up the taste test when everybody comes back. I think we have time. We can do that. All right. Everybody should take out a Tic Tac, but don't put it in your mouth yet. Okay. I'll wait till everybody gets one. Okay. Once you have, we're going to do this together. It's very important. We all do this together. And it's very important that you don't put it in your mouth and start chewing it up. When we start, I just want you to put it in your mouth and let it dissolve. And we're going to talk about it. Everybody understand? All right. Put it in your mouth. What's the first thing you taste? Sweet. Basic taste. What else? Should pick up some vanilla. A little bit of an aromatic sweet, some vanilla. So we had a basic taste. We had some vanilla. Let it sit in your mouth and tell me if you start noticing anything different. Cooling, starting to get some cooling mouthfeel. Some of you may be picking up a little bit of bitter. Some of you might be picking up some of the mint. I know we had the cooling, but now you're going to start to get some of the mint eventually. Some of you may start to salivate a little bit. Certainly, you're going to have a little bit of dry. Okay. What I'm demonstrating here, and it's using these Tic Tacs because they physically dissolve, is what we call order of appearance. Whenever you taste a food product, whether it's grass-fed milk, grass-fed beef, beer, tea, whiskey, there's an order that you perceive things in, and it doesn't come in groups. Unlike the training we just did, we don't get all the basic taste first. sweet, sour, salty, bitter. And then we get aromatics and then we get mouthfeels. Depending on the product, depending on how it's been prepared, made, we have a certain order of appearance where we get certain things early in the flavor. In the case of this, we had the sweet, we had the vanilla. Then we start to get some mouthfeels like cooling. Then maybe we get another basic taste like bitter. And some more mouthfeels, right? Maybe some astringency or salivating. And then we get some minty on aromatic. So when we train people to be instruments, we're teaching them to look for basic taste, aromatics, mouthfeels, but we're also teaching them to make sure we're recording things in the order that we perceive them. And I showed you earlier that it matters. The very first thing on that slide that was called flavor leadership criteria was early impact of identifiable flavor. When you put something in your mouth, it immediately tastes like what you expect. That's order of appearance. So as a trained instrument, unlike a GC and HPLC, something in the lab that just tells you what's there, we're a more complicated instrument and we're a more powerful instrument because we can not only pick up things that are there, but we can measure the interactive effects. We can measure the order of appearance. We can measure balance of flavor, fullness of flavor, which makes us a very powerful instrument. By the way, we start off a powerful instrument because the human nose is more sensitive to chemistry than any instrument in the world, okay? We solved an off-flavor problem in bottled water, was coming from the package, that people were screaming about. The product got recalled from the market. It had such a bad taste, the consumer said. When we finally identified the chemistry and determined the level that it was in there, it was in the water at 0.2 of a part per quadrillion. So let me put that in perspective for you. If we were to go to the stadium that the Patriots play in, Gillette Stadium, if you take that stadium and fill it with water, a part per quadrillion is 1 drop of water in that stadium. That's how low a part per quadrillion is. This was 0.1 of a part per quadrillion. There's no instrument in the world that could figure out what that chemistry was. So how did we do it? We combined sensory with analytical chemistry. So we have a GC mass spec is a very sophisticated instrument. It's one that helps us identify chemistry. And we put what's called an odor detection port on it. And we put a trained person at the instrument so that as things separate out on the instrument and they go to the mass spec, which normally tells us what it is, a little bit of that sample comes to the funnel so we can smell it. And what happens is the panelists like me will smell it and say, I smell bacon. And the mass spec will just have a flat line. It doesn't see anything because I'm smelling a compound that I can easily pick up, but it's below the detection limits of the instrument. And it's a problem. As we research these metabolites, as we research flavor compounds, as we research grass-fed products, if we just do analytical chemistry, we only get part of the story because we have sensitivity limits. And even you'll hear stories, and you can Google it, electronic noses. The limitation of electronic noses are the sensors. There are no mechanical sensors that can get down to the levels that our human nose can. They just aren't. So it makes us as human instruments extremely important, extremely valuable in measuring that flavor chemistry. Okay. So we did order of appearance. Let me get through that. Balance and fullness I talked about earlier. So I'm going to suggest we take like a 10-minute break. Does that sound good? Let's take 10 minutes, use the restroom. When you come back, we're going to go into some more milk tasting, but this time a little differently. And then we're going to taste some hamburger and wrap everything up. So let's take any questions before we leave for 10-minute break? Why don't we take 10 minutes? Stretch your legs. So we're going to get started back up here in a minute, and I'm going to ask you to do me a favor while we're waiting for people to come back. If you could go up to the table again. This time there's going to be 2 sheets. One is a cheat sheet that I want to go over real quick. The other is a trained taster score sheet, and grab 3 cups again. They're red, yellow, and green. So when you have a moment, don't taste anything yet, but go grab your supplies and then we'll get going. Huh? Okay. So again, for those of you who've already got your samples, I don't want you to taste them. Don't worry if they warm up a little bit. Just leave them in front of you till we get to that point. And I appreciate you self-serving for the milk, and promise you this is the last thing you have to get up for. The hamburger will come over like it did earlier, directly to your table. And what the intent of this session is to now take some of the things that we taught you and let you feel a little bit more what it's like to be a professional taster, what types of things we're measuring, how we're measuring them, the complexity of what we're doing, but the power of the data that we're generating. And I will tell you, I was talking to some folks earlier, this methodology, as simple as it seems, measuring basic taste, aromatics, mouthfeels, learning to do it well, has led to most of the global market leading food and beverages in the world. And I was talking to people earlier to give you some examples. When I was at Arthur D. Little, we developed Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice. We developed that Ocean Spray Cranberry Juice, Budweiser beer, Bud Light beer, Jack Daniel's whiskey, Dunkin' Donuts coffee, which is still the #1 coffee in the US, just bragging about that. My point is that it works. And we know what it takes to produce products that customers want. And so we know what people want grass-fed milk to taste like. We know what they want grass-fed beef to taste like. The question is, what are they getting now? How do we understand it? And what affects it? How can we change things? But remember one of the first slides, but do it economically. Do it in a way that we save people money, that people can afford to have high quality products. And so what I want to do is quickly share with you, we'll do one at a time. We'll start with the grass-fed milk, a little bit of the work that we have going on and how we're looking at milk using these trained tasters like you are now. And then I want to taste these grass-fed milk and let's talk about them in a different way. Now, I did have you pick up what's called a cheat sheet. One of our objectives in both the grass-fed milk and grass-fed beef is to create a cheat sheet for those products. This is a general one for just food products in general. And you'll notice on one side, the side that has all the words, these are just common descriptive terms to help you come up with words to describe what you smell and taste. Because what we find is if people aren't trained, they still smell and taste things. They just struggle to describe it and say, yeah, I'm getting a taste, but I don't know what to call it. And the only difference between you and a highly trained professional taster is they have words, objective words to describe what they smell and taste. So one of our missions in both of these projects is to develop terminology to help people describe what grass-fed milk smells and tastes like, and to help people describe what grass-fed beef smells and tastes like. The second challenge is to educate people to the vocabulary so that we're all on the same page. So that as we discuss grass-fed beef, as we discuss grass-fed milk, we can be talking about the same things, using the same words, and have confidence that we are in fact talking about the same sensory characteristics, whether they be positive or negative. Now, when we first start training people, we allow people to bring these to panel. There's nothing wrong with having this in front of you when you're doing an assessment and you run into something. Maybe you're tasting milk and it's, oh, this got a strange taste. Look at this list and see if something's there that's going to help you come up with a word. At the end of the day, we want the best words possible, objective words to describe what you smell and taste, because we can do something with that data. And I'm going to tell you a story at the end of this about how powerful it can be if you use the right words. Now, on the other side of the sheet, it just reminds you of the tongue and the nose. It reminds you of some things that we didn't go over, things like total intensity aroma, total intensity flavor. We are measuring those things in our project, and I'll show you. It gives you mouth feels and nose feels. We didn't talk about nose feels, but just like we have mouth feels, you also have nose feels. You smell ammonia or ammonia salt and you get pungency in your nose. That's a nose feel. You smell, if you get Pepsi that just came out of the plant and you smell it, it's going to tickle a little. You're going to get what we call CO2 tingle. It's a nose feel. Okay, so we get nose feels just like we do mouth feels. So this is one you can use right now, but I'll tell you that one of our missions is to use the data that we're collecting to create some very specific sheets like this to share with everybody in the value chain so that we can start using the same terms. Okay, and it's funny because I ask people, especially grass-fed beef, what's that flavor? And I get 50 different words. People will say, what's that flavor? What's that? And a lot of times it just defaults to that word I said earlier. It's got a depth of flavor, whatever that means. Okay, so let's go on to these projects. I don't know why I got back in my slides. So we'll start with grass-fed milk. We're actually further along in grass-fed milk than we are with grass-fed beef. We just finished up a 4-year USDA NIFR study that I mentioned some of earlier, where we collected raw milk from farms that were producing 100% grass-fed milk and grass-fed milk that wasn't 100%. We did market pickups across the country. We did a ton of sensory. We did some chemistry. We did a little bit of healthy fats analysis. And then Sarah and my colleagues, we had a lot of non-sensory stuff going on where they're understanding what's happening at the farm as far as the agronomy and other things going on. I'm just going to focus on the sensory stuff. We just were awarded another 4 years at UVM to continue this work. And we're taking a deeper dive into the grass-fed milk. And the reason we want to do that, the whole purpose of this is to increase the market, to look at what's affecting the flavor quality of grass-fed milk that might be limiting its potential to grow. So we are specifically now trying to find everything that affects the quality of the milk from the farm level. What are the cows eating? How are they exercising? How are they being milked? What's the milking schedule? What are the disinfectants? As much data as we can to correlate against our sensory results to see if we can see a cause and effect. We've added processors. So on the how slide, we're getting raw milk from a bunch of farms. This time around, it's interesting because the bulk of our sampling is going to be in New York with Family Farmstead, Tom McGrath. Some of you may know Tom and his A2 milk. And we're going to be collecting raw milk over the next 3 years, every other month or once a quarter from all of the farms and doing sensory on the milk. The piece we added is we're also going to be collecting pasteurized milk from the processors. So we're getting it from Tom. So all of the raw milk we're getting, we're going to have samples that they processed and pasteurized to see what changes when they pasteurize. And then we're going to follow that milk to the market and see what does that milk taste like a couple of weeks later when it's in the market and try to connect the dots.
Are you experimenting or controlling for different types of pasteurization too?
We are in this sense, we have more than one processor. So he uses one small batch, I'll call it small batch pasteurization, although they're doubling their tankage, I think, in the next month or two. But we have other companies like Organic Valley involved that are sending us samples every other month of their 100% grass-fed milk that's been pasteurized in a very different way, different size batches. So yes, we are looking at different types of pasteurization. On top of that, even though some of us will actually be tasting the raw milk, we have health restrictions that we technically have to pasteurize the raw milk before we can taste it at the university. So we have a pilot scale pasteurizer in the lab. So all the raw milk that comes in, some of us will taste the raw milk. Most of it gets pasteurized on a benchtop level and gets tasted by the panel. So we'll have differences in pasteurization from gallon size pasteurization up to Tom size, up to what someone like Organic Valley or Maple.
But it's duration, temperature that makes a huge difference in my experience as a former dairy producer.
And I'm glad you said that because we've been working with the process to collect data, and all of them, no matter what size, the answer is we set the temperature and it's a certain time and it stays that way all the time. And we're trying to convince them, well, we'd like to get the actual data, like any small changes in temperature and time and how things ramp up, because the way that it ramps up and heats can change batch to batch. So to the extent that we can look at that, we're looking at it. But in the end, this particular project, we're going to have raw milk. We're focused on 100% grass fed, but in the study with the market samples, we'll be collecting grain finished milk or not grass fed. We're going to be looking at organic milk, and we're going to looking at least 3 suppliers of 100% grass fed. So we'll be benchmarking in the market, what does the consumer actually see? And where does 100% grass-fed fall from a flavor quality standpoint compared to organic grass, just grass-fed, not 100%, versus walk in the store and just buy the whatever the store brand is, whole milk. There are other dimensions of the work as well. We're doing healthy fats analysis, beta carotene on all the milk samples so we can connect the dots with healthy fats. We're doing the testing that I just trained you. So we're using this kind of methodology to objectively assess the flavor of the milk using basic taste, mouthfeels, aromatics, aftertaste, balance and fullness, order of appearance. And in the first study, we were able to develop a quality model that we could use where we could give our panel, our trained panel, a sample. They would develop objective results. We would apply this mathematical model and predict how much the customer would like it. And then we tested the model at several organic dairy conferences we had, and it was spot on. So we now have a tool that we're still going to do some consumer testing, but we have a tool that we can give samples to our panel, and by the end of that panel, understand how much is the end user going to like that? Are they going to like that one more than this one? So it's a very powerful tool.
It's a really quick question that maybe you already answered. Are all of the testings blind testings? Like they
Yes.
don't know what, okay.
Yes. Similar to what I did to you, I'm going to tell you, Dan, what these brands are. We do good science, like any scientific experiment. So the panel doesn't know which sample is which. They don't know if it's a week old, a day old. They don't know who produced it. They don't know if it's a farm sample, a market sample. And we do multiple blind replications and random order. So you don't even know, you might end up with 4 samples from the same farm on a panel and you don't know. So it's all done using good science, which is typical in sensory science, right? We're using this very sensitive instrument. If anything, we have to have a stronger design and pay more attention to this stuff so that we don't get any bias, right? We don't do flavor by eye, but we also don't want people to know, okay, that first one is a raw milk sample from so-and-so farm and that one, we want them to just be an instrument, just like in the lab. The instrument doesn't know what the samples are. You put a sample in there, the instrument says, here's what I detect. And so that's what we're doing. And what we want to do is the whole emphasis of this project is to grow grass-fed milk, to grow the market. And to grow the market by understanding what exists now, what affects the flavor quality, all the way back to the farm level. And then through education, work with the farmers, work with the processors to help optimize the flavor quality of the milk. And then market that flavor quality in a way that we can grow the market. So that's our emphasis. Now, you just picked up 3 more samples. And this time around, I'm not going to ask you to write down anywhere how much you like them or which one you like more. What we're going to do is we're going to look at them objectively. So this is the score sheet that we're using. There's actually 2 slides here. You should have a score sheet that you picked up that mimics this. Balance is harmony. So I want you to taste the milk and just think about, does it seem like something's sticking out or does it seem like it just tastes like milk? It's very creamy. It's very blended. It's got a lot of harmony. Fullness is complexity. So when you taste the milk, think, does it taste like non-fat milk, not very complex, or does it taste like cream or full-fat milk? That's what fullness is. TIF is total intensity of flavor. How strong does the milk taste? Does it have hardly any taste? Or usually milk at cool or room temperature doesn't have a lot of taste. It shouldn't. We're going to talk about dairy intensity and dairy type. How strong, slight moderate to strong, is the milk intensity? And then we're going to talk about the dairy type. And dairy type is a continuum that goes from milk to cream to cheese. Does it taste more milky? Does it taste almost creamy, buttery? Or is it so complex that it's like cheese? Okay. Swa and Barney, that's on our sheet. I just shared that with you. Swa is that baby pea diaper taste. Barney is like going into a barn. It tastes like the barn is in the milk. Earlier, I was mentioning when I first came up here, the farmers loved 100% grass-fed milk. And a bunch of them would taste it and say to me, I love it because it tastes like the farm. It tastes like my barn. But that's a farmer. And you try to sell that to a person out there, they don't feel the same way. And that's what we learned. We're going to measure sweet, sour, and bitter on the tongue. So sweet on the tongue. So if you want to hold your nose, you can hold your nose. And we're going to measure mouthfeel as a combination category. So just make a couple notes. You don't have to use this sheet. I'm just showing it to you as an example. What I want you to do in a second is go through and we're going to taste these together and talk about what you're picking up. Now, we're also going to be very concerned about what's called aftertaste. So for each of these samples, we're going to do them together. We're going to reach a point where I'm going to say, okay, take one more taste and stop. And then we're going to wait about a minute and we're going to talk about what's left in your mouth. And then we're going to wait another 3 minutes. I'm going to ask you while we're waiting, don't drink water, don't eat a cracker. Just let the flavor continue to either be there or disappear. Does everybody understand? Can I have one of each sample, Sarah? All right, so we're going to go to sample number 1. Why don't you go ahead and taste the red sample, I guess is the first one, right? Taste the red sample. Think about what it tastes like and be ready to talk about it in a second. Think about that score sheet. Think about basic taste, aromatics, mouthfeels. Okay. Now I'm curious, while you're tasting it, what kinds of things are going through your mind? What are you picking up? You should get dairy. Everybody tastes milk, right? You had me worried. It was awful quiet in here. I thought maybe we slipped something in. It does have some aromatic sweet, almost like vanilla. And by the way, we have a very strict rule. When we're smelling things, we cannot use the words sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. We can only use those words on the tongue. So if you smell something sweet, you have to use an adjective. You have to say it's vanilla sweet, or it's a burnt sweet, or it's a bakery sweet. And if you smell sour, you have to say it's milky sour, it's fruity sour, it's winey sour. If you smell bitter and it's on your cheat sheet, we call it resinous. So if you smell bitter, you can't say I smell bitter. You say it smells resinous. And if you smell salt, we have to say briny. Okay, so we don't use sweet, sour, salty, bitter on those. So when I taste this milk, just so you know, and I'm going to bounce around on the score sheet, I get moderate intensity milk. It's clearly milk, right? I can tell. It's not slight, it's not strong. On the complexity side, it's creamy. It's not like non-fat milk. It's on the creamy, not quite buttery yet, although some of you might think it's a little bit buttery. It does have some aromatic sweet, almost vanilla-like or marshmallow-like, something like ethyl maltol would be the compound. It's got a little bit of sweet on the tongue, but really not a lot. If you did hold your nose, you would see it really doesn't have a lot of sweet. It's not as sweet as a piece of chocolate. Most of the sweet you're picking up is actually in the nose. All right, I want everyone to take a taste, take a nice healthy taste, and then don't taste anything else after that. Let's just taste it. Okay. Now, while we're waiting, I'm going to start my clock up here. Now, while we're waiting, what else are you picking up? What are you getting for mouthfeels? For me, I'm getting mouth coating. When I drink this milk, it almost feels like there's a little film inside my mouth. And it's a fatty mouth coating. Not really greasy. Sometimes we taste meat products and we get a real greasy mouthfeel. This is more just a fatty, maybe a little waxy mouthfeel. It's got a little bit of dry. This also has a little bit of tongue sting. And it's a kind of tongue sting that we call, and I have to get away from my Boston accent because in Boston, I would say it has a harsh mouthfeel. But I'm told that I have to say my R's, so I have to say it has a harsh mouthfeel. I do say I park my car in Harvard Yard, just for the record. But a harsh mouthfeel is a mouthfeel that's very problematic because it's not so much thing that the average consumer can tell you about it, but it's a mouthfeel where you put something in your mouth and it's just got a low level of irritation that makes you want to either swallow quickly or spit it out. It's difficult holding it in your mouth. When you put this milk in your mouth, it actually becomes a little uncomfortable after a few seconds, and you want to either swallow it or spit it out. It's a very important mouthfeel, and we find it in grass-fed milk, and we find it in the grass-fed beef as well. Okay, now the grass-fed beef has some things that help because the fats, the grease, the intensity of flavor help to overwhelm some of this, but we pick it up as well. All right, we're at 1 minute. What's left in your mouth now? Do you have any taste left in your mouth? You should. If this were not grass-fed milk, you would not have much left in your mouth right now. One of the biggest things we're finding with grass-fed milk, grass-fed beef is aftertaste. And remember, one of our flavor leadership criteria, things have to disappear quickly because people want to drink more. This doesn't meet that criteria because this is a slight to moderate level flavor still left in my mouth. Now, also of interest is what is that flavor you have left in your mouth? It's Barney. It's a couple of things. One is some people would describe it as Barney or animally, like the farm. Part of it is got a rubbery, almost like a rubber balloon taste or a rubber glove taste. We don't find that in non-grass-fed milk. We're finding that in grass-fed milk, and that's an issue. Okay. Some people would call it a chemical mouthfeel. We don't really like using that term. It's okay, but we like to know more about it. Is it rubbery? Is it Barney? And the more you taste it, it almost starts to have a minty taste to it. And that's a really curious note we're finding in grass-fed milk. Every once in a while, we get higher levels of this Barney taste, higher levels of rubber glove, and all of a sudden people start using the word minty, like a mint-flavored toothpick, like a little bit of toothpick woody in the mouth. Okay, now we're coming up to 3 minutes. What's left in your mouth? You still get it. You get some bitter, you get some Barney. Yeah, the intensity is going down. That's a great point. The intensity of the aftertaste is going down, but the flavor is still there. All of these are grass-fed milk. Do yourself a favor, try a little bit of non-grass-fed milk, wait a few minutes after you drink it, and see what's left in your mouth. You're going to see how clean the aftertaste is. So one of our big focuses in the work we're doing with grass-fed milk is on the aftertaste, because we have a lot of samples that when we're doing the first like 30 seconds, minute, you're tasting it, filling out that score sheet, we're not picking up the Barney. We're not picking up the rubber glove. It takes a little while to develop. And it's one of these things that the average user doesn't understand. So they're not going to tell you, if you say, why don't you drink a lot of that milk? They're not going to say, I've got this strange Barney taste that's left in my mouth afterwards. Typically, they don't say those things. They just say, it doesn't taste right. It's yucky. But the panel helps us understand that. Now, if we measure that and we measure different levels of this in different samples, we can correlate against all the other data we have and try to understand what's causing that to happen. All right, now you can drink a little water if you have some or eat a cracker. And I want to go on to the second sample, which is going to be the yellow one. And I don't know about you, but I still have that Barney and I still have that, whatever that off flavor is. So when you clean your mouth a little bit, go ahead and taste the yellow sample and think about that one for a few minutes. I'm surprised. I wonder if they get the samples right. Sorry, I know what the answers are supposed to be. I hope so. I love when they do that to me. I never mind. The only time I ever mind getting tested was, I think it was in Germany. And I had this wise guy. If you're a trained taster, don't ever let people test you because people are jerks, right? They try to fool you. And I was in a bar and this guy said, he heard us talking. I was there with some Heineken folks. And he said, you can't smell the difference between a beer and tell me what it is just by smelling it. And I said, the major brands, Heineken, Budweiser, Beck's, absolutely, I can smell it and tell you which one it is. And the guy said, I don't believe it. I'm going to put a beer in front of you. You tell me what it is. And I agreed. I had a few beers, so I'm like, okay, fine. And he puts it in front of me, and I instantly know that he's playing around because I can tell it has combinations of things between Heineken and Budweiser. And I'm like, this isn't funny. I said, you wanted to really do it? That's fine. He had mixed 3 different beers together and was trying to catch me in saying it. And I said, no, I said, it's just not worth it. Don't do that. All right, the yellow one. What are you going to say about is the yellow one different than the red one? How is it different? What do you find different? A little bit buttery? I get Barney in the flavor, right? As you're tasting it. Does everybody get Barney when you first taste that? Yeah, I would say, unlike the first one where the Barneyness came in late, this one, the Barney is there in the first couple sips. It's not very intense, but it's there. I also think it tastes a little bit buttery. I think it's a little bit more complex as far as dairy. It's creamy, but now verging on the butteriness. I also think the sweet on the tongue is a little bit higher than the first one. This one's a little bit higher.
Sweet. So pulled from the table, some noticed the Barney, but I think there's somewhat of a consensus that there was more richness.
I think it's more creamy. It's more full bodied. It's more complex than the first sample. Now let's go ahead and take a taste and then we're going to start the clock and see what happens in the aftertaste. And I'm already concerned. And I'm saying that because while I'm talking, that Barney and that rubber glove taste is getting more intense, even before I took that last taste. So we'll start the clock and wait a minute. Any questions while we're waiting for the minute? This is the challenge we have. Now, just so you know, the methodology we're using is called flavor profile. It was developed by Arthur D. Little right in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It was the first descriptive method in the world, developed back in the 1940s. And it is a consensus method, meaning we never train people to taste by themselves. We do sensory using a panel of at least 4 people. And we have a discussion. First, we taste the samples. We don't talk about them. Then we have a discussion, and you can change your answer if you want during the discussion. And then in the end, we come to a consensus result, and we'll average the data. Okay. And it's very important that we do that because groupthink is more powerful than individuals. And we've got the data to show that we can take 50 individuals, but if they act as individuals, we collect the data, they will never be as precise and accurate as a group of 4 people working together. Okay. Group sensory is so much more powerful than individual sensory. What would you say now? You got something left in your mouth? It's dry. I think it's drier than the first one. It has Barney, but I think this has more of the rubber glove toothpick taste than the Barneyness. The Barney's there, but you're definitely picking up a chemical taste, almost like a disinfectant or something in the taste, and a little bit of that minty. Is anyone getting anything else? What is it, sour? A little bit like sour milk. There's sour in the milk, right? That's basic taste. This has a little bit almost sour milk taste, maybe a little what we call fatty acid sour, baby spit up. Definitely as I'm talking, I'm getting more of the oxidation notes, the woody, the toothpick kind of notes. Does everybody have a flavor left in their mouth now? Or is anybody sitting there saying, I don't get anything anymore? Everybody has some flavor left. That's the first step, is just realizing we've got some aftertaste. Second step is beginning to learn how to describe it. What is it? The consumer doesn't care what it is. They just care that there's aftertaste there and they can easily detect it. All right, let's go ahead and taste again, and we won't go to 3 minutes. Go ahead and drink some milk and a cracker. We need to get going here. I want to make sure we're done by the disco party. Go rinse out with some water, taste the green one. And so one of the things we're doing now, I hope you can appreciate what we're doing now. Unlike when you first came in and the discussion was around, do you like the milk or not? How much do you like it? That's incredibly valuable information. Now we're functioning as an instrument and we're discussing the characteristics and the intensity of those characteristics. And if you had gone through a year of training, 5 years of training, 10 years of training, you would be getting really good at describing all of these little things that you're tasting while you're drinking the milk and the aftertaste. That's the trick to becoming a calibrated, trained panelist, is practice learning all of that vocabulary. Now, we're going to make it easy for some of you because in our work, we're going to provide you with the terms that were coming up, and we're going to provide you with reference standards that you can practice with and teach yourself what some of these things taste and smell like. Okay. All right. So the green one, what do you think about the green one? Okay. So I heard sweet, not as fatty, less intense. I'm going to agree with you. My first reaction is it's less complex. This one didn't seem to have the depth of flavor. It is a grass-fed milk, but it doesn't have the depth of flavor. It is a little sweeter. It's also a little bit more sour. It doesn't have the harmony, doesn't have the balance the first two had. This one seems a little bit watery, and you can easily tell a couple things that are there. Like skim milk almost, right? But do yourself a favor. When you get a chance, taste skim milk versus low fat versus full fat and see the difference. There's a big difference. And then taste some of these grass feds and then some cream. And if you really want a shock, taste some buttermilk, but that's a whole different product. What I'm not getting in this one is that Barney, that other thing. I'm not picking that up. This tastes more like milk that I would just go to buy the store that wasn't grass-fed. Okay, so go ahead and take a sip and we're going to do the aftertaste. This is going to be difficult because some of the aftertaste we're going to get is from those first two samples because that's not gone yet. That aftertaste lasts for a while. But go ahead and taste some more. Okay, I'll start the clock. Almost has a sour milk taste to it. Does it have a little sour milk, fatty acid, baby spit up? Not quite vomit. Cheese has a lot more vomit notes. Not quite what? But already as I'm talking, and sometimes if you talk, it affects the aftertaste. So on panel, when we're waiting for aftertaste, we in general limit how much people talk. Because the more you talk, the more oxygen's coming in your mouth, and it can actually change what you're perceiving in your mouth. What I'm tasting might be a little bit different than you because I can't shut up. I always have to talk. And I should just be sitting there. But already, this tastes cleaner than the first two. Already, I have some dry, maybe a little coating, but there's not as much stuff there. There certainly is not stuff there that if I were not trained, I would say, I got a strange, yucky taste in my mouth, right? This feels like I just tasted some milk. And I've got a little bit of the milk flavor left, a little bit of the oily mouthfeel. I am picking up a little Barney, but I don't think it's from this sample. I think it's from the other samples. I will tell you that these three products we used in two of the conferences, and we predicted using our model that the third one would be most liked. The middle one would be least liked, and the first one would fall in between, but less liked than the third one. And some of you don't agree because you're farmers or you have worked with farmers. I will tell you that the first one is Organic Valley, 100% grass-fed. That kind of falls in the middle, and that fell in the middle, although we saw big ranges across the country. The second one was Maple Hill, 100% grass-fed. That was the one that has continuously, when we did our overall liking test at the conferences, would come out less liked. And the third one is a funny one because it's Horizon. And they're grass-fed, but I don't think they're 100% grass-fed. So it's maybe not comparing apples to apples. Okay, now we're going to run out of time, so we're going to go on to the next one. The next one is Megan's thing, and I'm going to talk about it, but it is her thing, and you can ask her questions later. But we're getting into grass-fed beef. And grass-fed beef is something that we've only started talking about and thinking about in the last year and a half. And I'll tell you that Jen has been doing literature searches for us. I had mentioned early on that not a lot of work has been done in grass-fed beef sensory and flavor. Lots of work is out there with beef flavor, but not a lot of work in grass-fed beef as far as trained sensory work. And in fact, that's what we pretty much have found. And so the work we're doing is pretty important because it doesn't exist yet. We don't have good objective technical data to really understand and talk about the flavor and the flavor variation we see in grass-fed beef. And so we've got a few organizations that have put some skin in the game and have some funding. The two primary ones are the Grass Farmers Association, the Vermont Grass Farmers, and Vermont Fresh Network. So this group and Vermont Fresh Network and us at the University of Vermont. And what we're doing is we're tasting grass-fed beef, just like with the milk. It's a very similar type of approach, but we're way behind the learning curve. With the milk, we've already got terminology. We've already got a sense of what's going on. We've already got measurements and some cause and effect. With grass-fed beef, we're really just beginning, right? That song, we've only just begun. But we are trying to come up with objective ways to describe the flavor and the flavor variation of grass-fed beef so that we can have better discussions and talk about research and talk about things we can do to understand it and understand the uniqueness of the beef. We're using the same approaches with the milk. So here you can see this is us up at UVM. Right now we're doing screening panels, which means we're using the sheet that you're going to use in a minute to objectively screen a bunch of samples to see what's out there, what kind of range do we have. Because unlike the milk study, we haven't done a national study. We haven't done a lot of market samples. We've looked at spring, summer, and fall from some local farms up in Vermont, and we see differences between those farms. And we're working on describing those differences and coming up with good terms to use. The goal here is to come up with good terminology, but also to develop reference standards so that we can teach people what those terms are. So a big part in the grass-fed beef is to come back here in a year or some point in the future and have sessions where we have reference standards to say, okay, when we say sour Barney or fecal Barney or green grassy or whatever, that we have reference standards to give you on the table and say, that's what we're talking about. Whenever we say this is a fecal Barney taste, that's it right there. We say this is a sweaty animal taste, that's the reference standard. So that's one of the objectives of what we're doing right now. But really, those are bad examples because what we're really trying to do is understand what's making it unique. The experts that talked before this session, people in the industry would tell you, again, grass-fed beef has this depth of flavor, this uniqueness, this wonderfulness, this thing. We want to understand what it is. And eventually, we want to understand how do average consumers out there feel about that? What do they want? What are they looking for? Once we get the reference standards and the terminology down, the plan is to educate. So we are going to take all this knowledge, what we're learning, tasting grass-fed ground beef. We've done some grass-fed steak work. We're not experts like Mark is, but we've done some. We plan to do a lot more. Ground beef tends to be more sensitive to some of the effects. So that's why we started. It also has to be a product that people use a little bit more of. And we're going to educate. And our goal here, different than the milk goal, because we're earlier in the process. Our goal is less about growing the industry yet, although that is our ultimate goal. Our goal is to develop terminology so we can have better discussions in meetings like this. Terminology so that farmers can talk to processors, can talk to retail, can talk to chefs, can talk to food service people, and really start to understand what this whole thing is and how can we work together to provide a great experience for the end user. And if we can do that, then we have success and we grow markets. But it really starts with this first, sure. Yeah, and we've had a lot of discussion around this and we're very early in the process, but we decided that we need a standard way to cook everything. We decided early on, we tasted steak, we tasted ground beef. We thought the ground beef showed more variation. And so we decided to go with ground beef. For health reasons, we're not undercooking it, we're cooking it. We've used 0 spices. I know that some people, I'm not going to mention any people said we really should add salt and do things. We can do that at some point, but we want to standardize that process. So right now we're not doing that. So these samples are probably not something you would eat on your table at home. You'd either be adding spices to it or mixing it, doing something else with it. But from a very first step standpoint, just seeing what we're up against, it standardizes the process so that we can start to develop terms. And it also gives us the best chance to look for unique flavors. Because like I said earlier, salt is a flavor potentiator, but it's a harmonizer. It tends to blend flavors, making it more difficult. So yeah, we're not making a statement today that this is the standard procedure. We're not there yet. What we're saying today is this is what we're doing right now to develop the terms and get the whole thing started. Okay. And then we're going to educate because I'm going to, in 2 weeks, I have to go to Scotland next week. But when I come back, we're doing a thing like this at Vermont Fresh Network annual meeting. And that's a bunch of farmers, processors, chefs, and retail all in the same room for us to begin to have these types of discussions. And so that's what the education is going to look like, where we get groups of people together in the same room and facilitate a discussion around the uniqueness and the depth and the excitement and try to maybe educate. Again, I go back to the experts on the panel talking about thinking about food in a different way. Maybe talking about food in a different way can help that process of helping people to think about food in a different way. At the end of the day, though, no matter what we do, it has to taste good in the eyes of the consumer. They have to want to eat it.
In America, I like more grain-fed beef. I mean, I kind of one, but I like the second. My taste preference was the exact opposite of what you said would be, and it's just maybe because what I grew up with. So could it be that it's hard when people like less complex milk or grain-fed milk, there's less depth of flavor, and that's what just people are conditioned to?
The question revolves around people's preferences sometimes be conditional on their environment, what they're used to. An example, I'm a city boy. My kids grew up with store-bought maple syrup, which is not maple syrup, right? It's sugar syrup with maple flavor. And now I live in Vermont and we have this wonderful natural product. They won't eat it. They won't because they're used to the artificial stuff that has more intense maple, but it's not as complex. It's not a full body. The answer to the question is that it is very complex. You are correct. There is segmentation. However, when we go around the world and people get exposed to different things, the general rules of what people like start to apply. You will always like certain things as an individual that your mom prepared something a certain way, or you lived on a farm. Heather Darby, my boss, loves that grass-fed taste. She loves Barniness. She doesn't represent the bigger segments of people that you're trying to attract to sell product in the market. Okay. So yes, you are correct. And by the way, we all have our own preferences. Nobody should ever tell anybody what you should like or not, right? It's just what segment do you fall in? What segment? What are you used to? We just finished up a bunch of work in India. And in India, market leading products did not meet the flavor leadership criteria that I showed you earlier. But the reason was the food industry in a lot of segments hadn't caught up yet to have the quality of products that meet those. So the market leading products that didn't meet it were the ones that closest met it, but didn't meet it yet. And as soon as the food companies we were working for started to produce products that better met those criteria, even though those other lower quality products were what people liked and wanted, as soon as they were exposed to something a little different, they fell into line with the global rules that we have. So it is a complex issue, and I'm making it simple in this session just as an introduction, but flavor segmentation is a big deal. And then when we jump into a different world that you folks deal with, the whole culinary experience. And when I think about steak and what's the best steak in the world, there's a lot that goes into that, right? And there's a lot. It gets very complex. But right now, we're going to keep simple as an instrument and stick with the rules. Okay, let's go. Now we're going to taste. We got a burger. You have a score sheet that we put on the table. This is not as complex as the milk one because we're just starting out. You'll notice that on this one, we're measuring total intensity of the smell of the hamburger. We're measuring beef intensity. They should be on the table. They were on those trays, or did they take them away? Did we take those sheets away? Oh, sorry, they're going to pass them out. You'll get your sheet in a minute. It's up here on the screen. So what I want you to do is taste sample number one and think about what it tastes like. Okay. Now, a couple of things. We're not going to talk about texture. Okay. Texture is incredibly important. How chewy is it? How rubbery is it? How dense is it? I want to put that on the back burner and talk about flavor. What do you get for basic taste, aromatics, and mouthfeels? So what do you get for basic taste when you taste this first sample? Okay, meaty's going to be an aromatic. Basic taste are going to be sweet, sour, salty, or bitter. I think the first thing you pick up is sour. It has a little bit of sourness on the sides of your tongue if you hold your nose. It's got a little bit of salty. And what's really intriguing to us is that throughout the program, as we've been tasting samples from the farm, we're finding that a lot of the samples have a salty taste, even though we're not adding salt. It's just the beef. It's really interesting. But you get sour, you get a little bit of salty. Aromatic, you get meaty. But how do you describe that meat? Does it taste like beef or something else? A bit livery. I would agree. I think this got a little bit of beef flavor, but I think this has other meat. You notice we're measuring beef and other meat? We would score this up to a 3 or a 4, slight to moderate, something other than beef. It's got a little bit of a livery taste or a gamey taste. Yeah, and it is gamey more than it is Barney. I'm not picking up a lot of the Barney taste like we had in the milk. This is more a gamey taste. Livery. And then what about mouthfeel? It's dry. I get some tooth packing, get little pieces of meat stuck in my teeth, and I get a little bit of a oily mouthfeel. What were you getting? Powdery. It's got a particulate. Yeah, we had a comment that it has powdery. We have a term called particulate mouthfeel, and it usually goes from powdery to grainy to chunky, the size of the particles going through. This does have a small particle mouthfeel to it. All right, take another taste and we're going to think about aftertaste. So take a taste and don't drink any water. Okay. We'll just wait about a minute. What are you picking up now? There's other things in here as well. You should be picking up a little bit of, some people would call it a bloody taste, like a little bit of a juicy metallic iron. You know, when most people taste blood, you're tasting the iron in your blood. If you were to taste our iron reference standard, we use ferrous sulfate. It tastes like you cut your finger or something, and you're just sucking on the blood. Just tastes straight like blood or rust. This has got a little bit of metallic taste in beef products and food. Is a tough one to negotiate because there's two sources of metallic taste in food products. Okay. One source are actual metals. We just mentioned iron, like ferrous sulfate or ferrous fumarate or copper or potassium or whatever, can give you metallic taste. But there are organic compounds that taste metallic. For example, when we do beer tasting, if you pick up a metallic taste in the beer, let's say you have a can of beer and you say, I'm getting metallic, and you assume I'm tasting aluminum or I'm tasting iron. There's an organic compound. It's called 3-octanone. It's a ketone that forms in fermentation that when you add it to beer, it tastes like the can. It tastes metallic. And so we have organic compounds that form in the beef that can be causing the metallic taste. So it's a hard one from a sensory standpoint. We can't easily just say, oh, that has metallic, it has a metal in it. We don't know because we're not good enough to know the difference between the metallic we get from an organic compound like the octanone versus a metal. All right, what about the aftertaste? What are you picking up now? Anything? I think it's got a lot of mouthfeel. It's got the oily, waxy. It's got some butteriness. Yeah, something very like rancid, little rancidity to it. Maybe brown butter. You brown the butter a little bit. It's got a little bit of rancidity. It's actually pretty clean. This has a pretty clean aftertaste. Yeah. All right, try sample number 2. So again, taste it, think for a few minutes, and we'll talk about basic tastes, mouthfeels, and aromatics. How does that compare to the first one? Okay, not very good is a consumer response, but why is it not very good? What are you picking up in this? That it's got more oily, greasy mouthfeel. It's got oxidized, well, kind of old tasting. So it's got a little bit of oxidation and rancidity. What else? You get an aromatic sour. It's gamey. It's even beyond gamey. It's almost like spoiled meat. And we have this note that we've been picking up in some of the grass-fed samples that we call spoiled ham. If you put cold cuts in your fridge ham and you let it sit there for 3 weeks and you forget about it and you open that package and you get that spoiled ham smell, although not that strong, it has that kind of a flavor to it. All right, why don't we taste the third one because we're going to run out of time here in a minute. Let's taste the third one. Does this taste different? I think this one tastes different. How does this one taste different? Someone said earthy. That's a note that we're finding in some of the grass-fed beef. It's a little sweeter, sweet aromatic. It's a little bit more blended. I actually think of the 3, this one might have the most beef flavor to it, right? The first one was a little bit livery. The second one, we didn't really mention it, but this one tastes like hamburger, right? It's got like a grilled beef taste to it. It's pretty clean, okay? All right, I'm going to push to the end here because we're almost at 5 o'clock. So this is what we're doing in grass-fed beef. We are resisting the temptation to really spend a lot of time focusing on the off-note yet. I'll tell you the truth, we haven't seen as much as we thought we might, because there's a lot of discussion about grass-fed beef and it has a strange flavor and consumers don't like it because it has a strange flavor. What we are seeing is unique flavor and depth of flavor, your terms, not mine. And it has to do with fullness and balance and beef intensity and some of the mouthfeels and the aftertaste, which actually in some cases is shorter than grain finished beef. And we'll be reporting on all of this as we do more, get more into the actual tasting. Right now, as I said earlier, we're still in the stages of understanding what it is and coming up with good standard terms and eventually good reference standards so that we can come in here and give you reference standards in bottles or food products and say, look, that's what we mean by full bodied. That's what we mean by beef versus cooked beef versus liver versus some. That's what we mean by this Barney sour taste or this gaminess. And once we have those reference standards, we can work together to say, okay, I get it. We're going to call that Barney. We're going to call that sour. We're going to call that full bodied. We're going to call it whatever. Okay. I'm going to leave it there and we'll ask some questions if you want, but.
Yeah, and in fact, I want to ask the first question and I'll let you guys go because one of the things that we are finding, interestingly enough, is again, we're finding some of the national brands to have the worst flavors, to really be almost like there have been a few times where Roy was like, don't anyone taste this. Are we sure it's okay?
It's not good.
And
Yeah.
it brings up to me, and Roy and I are having these questions and struggling with this a little bit is we're getting all the meat for the other stuff as a consumer would, either direct from the farm at a farm stand or off of a retail shelf. And we're having local brands, national brands, and we're handling it very carefully. We're making sure that it's frozen, it's all frozen, and we're thawing it very thoughtfully. And we're wondering, and this is part of why we're having this discussion across the whole supply chain, a question's coming up for us, like, is grass-fed beef less resilient than corn-fed beef? Does it pick up flavors along the supply chain potentially as well? Because we're really finding some off flavors with our local team,
Yeah.
with some of our locals, but a little less. We're really finding some really off flavors with some of the ones that would be in the supply chain longer and out there. And so this study is bringing up more questions and we're really just at the surface of what are the implications. And yeah, thanks. Now we can go to other questions. Yeah.
And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but what I have is none of these are local. The first one
Walden is local. Sorry. Walden is New England.
it says New England. So
Yeah.
Walden Farms from New England. Wishnot Farms from Missouri.
So Walden is one.
Walden is number one.
Yeah.
Wishnot Farms from Missouri is number two. These are all grass-fed, 100% grass-fed. And the third one is from Australia. It's Aussie beef from Australia. So that's really not local.
We've got some work to do.
We're at 5 o'clock, but if anyone has any questions, you can ask them now, or I have no problem staying for a little bit and answering questions as well.
Sorry, just for housekeeping. It is 5 o'clock and we do have to transition out. And Roy's gotta go because he's flying to Scotland and the weather's not good. But Roy, you can use your Hoova app to ask him questions and it might take us a little while, but we can respond to that. We're gonna have to get up and they're gonna clear your tables, so don't worry about it.